The McKinley Saloon didn't look like the kind of place where lives changed, but that's exactly what it was. A coffin with a piano, where dreams went to drown and desperation wore a smile. Mara pushed through the doors just after sunset, her boots catching on the warped floorboards. The smell hit her first: tobacco, sweat, spilled beer, and something else. The particular stench of men who'd given up pretending to be decent. Her brother Danny sat at his usual table, cards spread before him like a prophecy of failure. "You're late," he said without looking up. The Hendersons' wash took longer than expected. Mara set a small cloth purse on the table. Coins clinked. $3, that's what I made this week. Danny's hand shot out, faster than seemed possible for someone who claimed the rheumatism made him unfit for real work. He dumped the coins into his palm, counting with the focus of a banker. His fingers were soft, unmarked. Mara's hands were raw, the knuckles split from lye soap and scalding water. $3. Danny's lip curled. "Hell, Mara, the Chinese girl down at Chen's Laundry makes $4. "Then hire her." The slap came quick, not hard enough to knock her down, but sharp enough to snap her head sideways. The saloon didn't even pause. A slap was weather. Expected. Unremarkable. "You watch that mouth." Danny leaned back, his chair creaking. "You live under Pa's roof. You contribute proper. $3 ain't proper. Pa's been dead 2 years. And whose fault is that?" There it was. The accusation that had followed her like a shadow since their father collapsed in the street, his heart giving out while Mara was 3 blocks away, scrubbing someone else's floors. Never mind that the doctor said nothing could have been done. Never mind that Pa had been sick for months, refusing treatment, refusing to slow down. In Danny's version of events, Mara had killed him through negligence and selfishness. She didn't argue anymore. Arguments required someone who listened. "I'll work the Morrison Ranch next week," Mara said quietly. "Mrs. Morrison pays $4 for a full week's washing and mending. Make it 5 and we'll call it square." "She won't pay 5, Danny." "Then make her." He gathered the cards, shuffling with theatrical flair. "You got a face like a mule anyway. Might as well use it to scare up some charity." Laughter erupted from the corner table. Tommy Briggs, red-faced and drunk at 19, slapped his knee. "Like a mule! Jesus, Danny, you got away with words." Mara's sister-in-law, Pauline, materialized at Danny's elbow like she'd been waiting for her cue. She probably had been. Pauline had a gift for appearing whenever humiliation was being served. "Honestly, Mara," Pauline's voice dripped with false concern, "if you just make an effort, a bit of ribbon in your hair, maybe a smile now and then. Men don't like women who walk around looking like they're headed to a funeral." "I'm headed to a funeral every day," Mara said. "Mine." Pauline blinked. "That doesn't even make sense." "Doesn't it?" Danny stood abruptly, his chair screeching. "You got something to say, sister?" Mara met his eyes. They were blue like hers, like their mother's had been, but where Ma's had been soft with kindness, Danny's were hard and mean. "No, nothing to say?" "Good." He pocketed the coins. "Because I'm tired of your moods. You want to stay under my roof, you earn your keep, and keep your damn opinions to yourself. You understand?" "Your roof." The words slipped out before Mara could stop them. "Funny. The deed still has Pa's name on it, and Pa left the house to both of us." The second slap was harder. This time people did look, but not with concern, with the mild interest of spectators at a dogfight. "The deed can be changed," Danny said softly. "Pauline's cousin is a lawyer now. He owes me a favor. You want to test me on this?" Mara tasted blood. She'd bitten her cheek. "No." "Smart girl." Danny sat back down. "Now get out of my sight. You're depressing the customers." Mara turned to leave. "Oh, and Mara?" Danny's voice followed her. "Bathroom needs scrubbing. Bledsoe's boys were in here earlier. Made a mess. You can take care of it before you head home." She didn't respond. Just walked toward the back of the saloon where the bathroom sat like a monument to human filth. The door hung crooked on its hinges. Someone had carved obscenities into the wood. Inside, the mess was exactly as bad as Danny had implied. Worse, probably. Mara stood in the doorway looking at the wreckage, and something inside her simply stopped. Not broke. Breaking implied sound drama, pieces scattering. This was quieter, like a gear slipping out of place, a disconnect. She walked back through the saloon. "Where you going?" Danny called. I said, "I heard what you said." "Then get your ass back there and—" "No!" The saloon went quiet. Actual quiet this time. Cards stopped shuffling. Glasses stopped clinking. Danny stood slowly. "What did you say?" I said no. Mara's voice didn't shake. That surprised her. "Clean it yourself, or hire someone, or let it rot. I don't care anymore. You're gonna regret—" "I already regret everything, Danny. Every day. Every choice that brought me here. So what's one more?" She left before he could respond, pushing through the doors into the cool evening air. Behind her, she heard Danny shouting, Pauline's shrill voice joining in, but their words were just noise now. Static. Mara walked. Not home. Not to the house that Danny claimed and Pauline infested, where Mara slept in a storage room barely big enough for a cot. She walked to the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to scrubland and the sky opened up like a wound. She sat on a boulder and pulled the newspaper from her pocket. She'd found it 3 days ago, stuffed in a trash bin behind the general store. Someone had used it to wrap fish, but one corner had stayed clean, and on that corner was an advertisement that Mara had now read perhaps 100 times. Wanted. Woman of strong character and sound health for marriage to established rancher. Must be willing to relocate to Dust Creek territory. Work required. Delicate constitutions need not apply. Respond to R. Hale. General delivery. Dust Creek Station. Dust Creek. Even the name sounded cursed. Mara had heard the stories. Everyone had. Dust Creek territory was where the law forgot to reach, where land barons ruled like kings and men died over water rights and fence lines. It was wild country, beautiful and brutal in equal measure. And Ronan Hale was its monster. The stories varied depending on who was telling them. Some said he'd killed his wife in a rage. Others said she'd died in childbirth and he'd buried himself in grief and silence. A few claimed he wasn't entirely human, something older, meaner, born from the desert itself. What everyone agreed on, Ronan Hale was not a man to cross. He lived alone on a sprawling ranch that he'd won in a poker game, or stolen, or inherited from a father who'd been even worse. He spoke to no one, trusted no one, and now apparently he needed a wife. Mara read the ad again. Woman of strong character. She almost laughed. Strong character, as if strength was something you could acquire, like a skill or a hat. Mara didn't feel strong. She felt scraped hollow, used up. But she also felt something else, something that had been building beneath the exhaustion and humiliation. Anger. Pure, clean, clarifying anger. Not the hot flash that made you slap back or scream. This was colder, sharper, the kind of anger that didn't waste itself on Danny's cruelty or Pauline's smugness, the kind that looked ahead and calculated. Mara had $43 hidden in a coffee tin buried in the yard. She'd been saving for 2 years, skimming coins whenever she could, telling herself she was saving for something. She'd never let herself imagine what. Hope was dangerous. It made disappointment hurt worse. But now, sitting on that boulder with the newspaper in her hands, Mara let herself imagine. A different life, a different place, different rules. Maybe Ronan Hale was a monster. Probably was. But he was far away from here. From Danny's fists and Pauline's pity. From a town that had watched her disappear one day at a time and never once looked concerned. Mara folded the newspaper carefully and stood. She knew what she was going to do. The letter took her an hour to write. She sat at the desk in the town library, the one place Danny never went, and went through 7 drafts before she found words that didn't sound desperate or pathetic or like she was trying too hard. Mr. Hale, I am responding to your advertisement. I'm 26 years old, in good health, and accustomed to hard work. I have experience in cooking, cleaning, sewing, animal husbandry, and basic carpentry. I do not drink, smoke, or gamble. I am not beautiful, but I am reliable. If you require a wife who will work without complaint and ask for nothing beyond fair treatment, I am suited to the position. I can be ready to travel within 2 weeks of receiving your response. Respectfully, Mara Coulter. She read it over 3 times, searching for anything that might disqualify her. Too desperate? too cold, not feminine enough. Finally, she decided it didn't matter. Either he'd respond or he wouldn't. Either way, she was done waiting for her life to improve by accident. She posted the letter the next morning. The response came in 9 days. Mara was scrubbing floors at the schoolhouse when the postmaster's son found her. He handed her an envelope with Dust Creek Territory stamped across the top, then stood there expectantly, waiting for payment or gossip or both. Mara gave him 2 pennies and sent him away. She didn't open the letter until she was alone. Sitting in the storage room she called a bedroom, her hands shaking so badly she nearly tore the paper. The handwriting was blocky, unpracticed, like someone who wrote infrequently and didn't care about elegance. Miss Coulter, your letter is acceptable. I require a wife who can work and will not expect conversation or affection beyond basic civility. If this suits you, arrangements can be made. A train ticket to Dust Creek Station will be held for you at the Ashford Depot. Travel light. Bring practical clothing and sturdy boots. The ranch is 30 miles from the station. The journey is not easy. If you change your mind, send word before you board. Otherwise, I will meet you at the station on the 23rd. R. Hale. That was it. No pleasantries, no questions about her family or her past. Just cold logistics. Mara read it twice, then folded it and slid it under her mattress. She had 11 days. Telling Danny was easier than she'd expected, mainly because she didn't actually tell him anything useful. I'm leaving, she said over breakfast, a meal she'd cooked as always, while Danny and Pauline sat like royalty. Danny looked up from his eggs. Leaving where? Town. For good. Pauline laughed. Oh, please. You don't have anywhere to go. I have a job. Out west. Doing what? Danny's eyes narrowed. Don't tell me you got suckered by one of those factory jobs. They'll work you to death and pay you nothing. It's not a factory. Then what? Mara met his eyes. That's my business. The fork clattered against Danny's plate. Your business? You think you get to have business separate from this family? I'm 26, Danny. I'm not your daughter. I'm not even really your sister anymore, am I? I'm just free labor you get to smack around. Pauline gasped. How dare you? I dare because I'm leaving. What are you going to do? Hit me harder? Take away my room? Mara laughed, and it felt strange in her throat, rusty, like a door that hadn't opened in years. Go ahead. I'll be gone in a week anyway. Danny stood, his chair tipping backward. You walk out that door, you don't come crawling back when whatever fool scheme you've got falls apart. I won't. I mean it, Mara. So do I. They stared at each other across the table. For just a moment, Mara saw something flicker in Danny's face. Surprise, maybe, or the faintest edge of uncertainty. Like he'd pushed something expecting it to bend, and instead it had pushed back. Then his face hardened again. Fine. Go. See if I care. You were barely worth the food you ate anyway. Mara nodded. I'll be out by the end of the week. She turned and walked upstairs, her heart hammering, but her hands steady. The next 6 days passed in a strange haze. Mara worked her final jobs, the Morrison Ranch, the Hendersons' laundry, Mrs. Yates's mending. She said nothing about leaving. Let them find out later. Let them wonder. She sold what little she owned, a quilt her mother had made, 2 dresses too nice for ranch work, a silver locket she'd never worn. The money added to her coffee tin stash brought her total to $61. Not a fortune, but enough for emergencies. Enough to feel like she had options. On her last night in town, Mara walked through the streets one final time. She passed the saloon where Danny was undoubtedly losing money he didn't have, the schoolhouse where she'd learned to read from a teacher who'd never bothered to learn her name, the church where the minister had once suggested that perhaps if Mara smiled more, the Lord would bless her with a husband. She felt nothing looking at these places. No nostalgia, no regret, just a clean, empty relief. At dawn, she walked to the depot. The ticket was waiting, just as Ronan Hale had promised. The clerk handed it over with barely a glance. Mara boarded the westbound train and found a seat by the window. As the train pulled away from the station, she looked back at the town once. Then she turned forward and didn't look back again. The journey took 3 days. The train cut through flat country first, farmland giving way to prairie, prairie giving way to something harder and more desolate. The towns grew smaller and farther apart. The people grew quieter, more watchful. Mara slept in her seat, ate hardtack and jerky from her pack, and spoke to no one. The other passengers ignored her, which suited her fine. A few men tried conversation, one offering whiskey, another asking if she was traveling alone, a third with hands that wandered too close before Mara made it clear she'd break his fingers. After that, they left her alone. On the third day, the landscape changed entirely. The earth turned red and gold, rising into mesas and buttes that looked like ancient cathedrals. The sky stretched wider than seemed possible. And the heat. Mara had thought she understood heat, growing up where summers baked the streets to dust. But this was different. This heat had weight, presence. It sat on your chest and made every breath feel earned. When the train finally pulled into Dust Creek Station, Mara was the only passenger who got off. The station wasn't much, a wooden platform, a small building that might have been an office or a storage shed, and nothing else. No town, no people, just the station, the tracks, and an endless stretch of desert rolling away in every direction. Mara stood on the platform, her bag at her feet, and waited. 10 minutes passed. 20. The train pulled away, leaving her in silence so complete it felt like a presence. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats. A single rider emerged from the heat shimmer, moving at an easy lope. As he got closer, Mara made out details. A big man on a bigger horse, dark hat pulled low, clothes dusty and worn. He stopped 10 feet away and dismounted. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Ronan Hale was not what the stories had led Mara to expect. Yes, he was big, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of build that came from actual work, not exercise. And yes, there were scars, a long one cutting through his left eyebrow, another along his jaw, smaller ones on his hands. But he wasn't a monster. He was just tired. That's what Mara saw first. Exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes, the set of his shoulders. He looked like a man who'd been carrying something heavy for a very long time and had forgotten how to set it down. "Miss Coulter." His voice was rough, underused, like he wasn't accustomed to speaking. "Mr. Hale." He nodded once, then gestured to the horse. "You can ride?" "Well enough." "Good. It's a long walk otherwise." He helped her tie her bag to the saddle, then swung up and offered his hand. Mara took it. His palm was calloused, his grip careful, and settled behind him. They rode in silence. The desert unfolded around them, vast and indifferent. Mara watched the landscape change, red rock giving way to scrubland giving way to high desert grassland. In the distance, mountains rose like broken teeth. It was beautiful in a way that felt almost hostile, like the land was daring you to love it, knowing it would kill you eventually. After an hour, Ronan spoke. "You know what you signed up for? A husband, a ranch, work. It's more than work, it's survival." He glanced back at her. "This land doesn't give. You take from it, or you die. I've been taking scraps my whole life. I can manage." Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. "We'll see." They rode on. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, a structure appeared in the distance. A house, small and square, with a barn and a few outbuildings scattered around it like dice someone had thrown and forgotten. "Home," Ronan said flatly. As they got closer, Mara saw the truth of it. The house was in rough shape, roof sagging, windows cracked, paint peeled away to bare wood. The barn looked half collapsed. Fencing lay in broken tangles. Everything spoke of neglect, of a place slowly dying from lack of care. But there was something else too. Beneath the decay, Mara saw the bones of what it had been. A good house, solid, built to last. It just needed someone to remember it was worth saving. Ronan dismounted and helped her down. They stood in the yard, dust settling around them. "It's not much," he said. Mara looked at the house, the broken fence, the work that would be required just to make this place livable. Then she looked at Ronan, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Waiting, maybe. Waiting for her to turn around, to demand he take her back to the station, to prove that she was like everyone else who'd looked at his life and decided it was too hard, too broken, too much. Mara picked up her bag and walked toward the house. "It'll do," she said. Behind her, she heard Ronan exhale, a long, slow breath like he'd been holding it without realizing. Then he followed her inside. The interior was worse than the exterior. One main room served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting space. A small bedroom off to the side. Everything covered in dust and disuse. Furniture was sparse and utilitarian, no decoration, no warmth. It looked like a place someone existed in, not lived in. Mara set her bag down and turned to Ronan. "Where do you want me?" He blinked. "What?" "Sleeping. Where do you want me sleeping?" "Oh." He looked uncomfortable. "Bedroom's yours. I'll take the loft." "That wasn't the arrangement." "It's the arrangement now." His tone left no room for argument. "You're here to work, not... I don't need a wife for that. I need a partner, someone who can hold this place together." Mara studied him. "What happened to your last partner?" His face went carefully blank. "She died." "How?" "That's my business." "Fair enough." Mara looked around the room. "Where do you keep the cleaning supplies?" "There's a closet out back. But you don't have to..." "I'm not starting a marriage in filth." Mara rolled up her sleeves. "You have a well?" "Out front. Pump's temperamental." "I'll figure it out." She walked past him, out into the yard. The pump was old, the handle stiff with rust. Mara worked it until water finally coughed out. Brown at first, then clearing to something almost clean. She filled a bucket and carried it inside. Ronan was still standing where she'd left him, looking lost in his own house. "You got a name you prefer?" Mara asked. "Or is it just Hale?" "Ronan's fine." "Okay, Ronan, I'm Mara, not Miss Coulter, not ma'am, just Mara." She found a rag that might have been clean once and dunked it in the water. "Now get out of my way. I have work to do." For a moment he just stared at her. Then, and Mara would swear later she didn't imagine it, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but something in that direction. He walked outside without a word. Mara scrubbed. She scrubbed until her arms ached and her back screamed and the water in the bucket turned black. She scrubbed floors and walls and windows. She beat dust out of the thin mattress in the bedroom. She swept years of neglect out the door. When she finally stopped, the sun had set and the house was dark. Mara lit a lamp, hands shaking with exhaustion, and looked around. It wasn't clean, not really, but it was cleaner. You could see the floor now, the table, the shape of the room. It was a start. She found Ronan sitting on the porch, staring out at the dark desert. "There's nothing to eat," she said. "There's jerky in the barn. That's not a meal." "It's what I've got," Mara sighed. "Tomorrow I'm making a list. You have money for supplies?" "Some." "How much is some?" He told her. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "Okay." Mara sat down beside him, her whole body aching. "We'll make it work." They sat in silence for a while. The desert at night was a different creature entirely, cool and vast, the stars so bright they looked close enough to touch. "Why'd you come here?" Ronan asked finally. "Because I had nowhere else to go." "There's always somewhere else." "Not for me." Mara looked at him. "Why'd you send for a wife?" "Because I need help." "You could have hired hands." "Tried that. They leave, or steal, or cause more trouble than they solve." He picked at a splinter in the porch railing. "Figured a wife might stay." "Because she's trapped?" "Because she's invested." Mara laughed, short and sharp. "That's honest, at least." "I'm not good at lying." "Neither am I." She stood, her knees popping. "I'm going to bed. We'll talk more tomorrow." "Mara." She turned. Ronan was looking at her with an expression that might have been gratitude or might have been something else entirely. "Thank you for coming. Thank me when I've earned it." She went inside and closed the door. In the small bedroom, Mara unpacked her bag, changed into a nightgown, and lay down on the mattress that still smelled like dust and time. Through the window, she could hear the desert settling into night, distant animal sounds, wind moving through grass, the creak of the house adjusting to her presence. Mara closed her eyes. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something that wasn't quite hope. Not yet, but maybe its shadow, maybe the beginning of it. She slept. Mara woke to the sound of an axe biting wood. She lay still for a moment, disoriented by the unfamiliar ceiling, the strange quality of light coming through the window. Then memory caught up. The train, the desert, Ronan's silence on the long ride, the house that looked like it had been slowly dying for years. She sat up, wincing. Every muscle in her body announced its displeasure with yesterday's work. Her hands were raw, two blisters already forming on her palms from the pump handle. Outside, the rhythmic crack of splitting wood continued. Mara dressed quickly in her oldest work dress, twisted her hair into a knot, and stepped out into a morning that was already warm and getting warmer. Ronan was by the woodpile, stripped down to his undershirt, sweat darkening the fabric across his shoulders. He worked with the steady efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, the axe rising and falling, wood splitting clean. He didn't look up when she approached. "You got coffee?" Mara asked. "Beans are in the canister by the stove, grinders somewhere." "Water?" "You know where the pump is." Mara bit back a response and headed back inside. She found the coffee beans easily enough. The canister was one of the few things that looked cared for, the lid fitting tight. The grinder took longer to locate, buried in a drawer beneath what looked like 3 years of accumulated junk. She got the fire going in the stove. It fought her naturally, the flue clogged with old ash, and set water to boil. While she waited, she inventoried the kitchen properly. It was grim. A sack of flour that felt suspiciously light. A tin of lard. Salt. Some dried beans that looked older than Mara. A few strips of jerky that might have been edible if you were desperate enough. And that was it. No vegetables, no fruit, no eggs, no butter, nothing fresh, nothing living. The coffee finished brewing just as Ronan came inside, carrying an armload of split wood. "How do you not have scurvy?" Mara asked. He dumped the wood by the stove. "What?" "This." She gestured at the nearly empty shelves. "This isn't food. This is what you eat right before you die." "I manage." "Barely." She poured coffee into 2 tin cups, handed him one. "We're going into town today." "Town's 20 miles. "Then we better start early." Ronan took the coffee, studying her over the rim. "You always this bossy? You always this determined to starve to death?" His mouth twitched again, that almost smile that seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised her. "Fair point." They drank their coffee standing up, the morning sun slanting through the dirty windows. Mara watched Ronan covertly, trying to reconcile the rumors with the man. The stories painted him as violent, dangerous, barely human. But the person standing in this kitchen seemed more broken than brutal, like someone who'd forgotten how to live and was just going through motions. "There's a wagon in the barn," Ronan said finally. "Needs a wheel fixed. Horses in the paddock, if you can call it that. Fence is mostly held together by hope." "Can you fix the wheel?" "Already did. Just needed to grease the axle." "Then what are we waiting for?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Nothing, I guess." They hitched the wagon, a process made harder by the horse, a rangy mare with attitude problems and a tendency to bite. Ronan handled her with rough affection, speaking low words that Mara couldn't quite hear. The horse settled, mostly, though she still gave Mara the kind of look that promised future violence. "Her name's Cinder," Ronan said, catching Mara's expression. "Does she hate everyone or just me?" "Everyone. But she's reliable when it counts." "Comforting." They set out as the sun cleared the horizon, the wagon creaking loud enough to wake the dead. The road, if you could call it that, was barely more than wheel ruts cutting through scrubland. It would have been easy to get lost if you didn't know the landmarks, the particular way this butte lined up with that distant peak. Ronan drove in silence, his hands easy on the reins. Mara used the time to look at the land properly. In daylight, it was even more striking. All that red rock and endless sky. The way distance worked differently here, everything farther than it looked. She saw cattle in the distance, moving in a scattered line toward water, wild horses on a far ridge, a hawk circling lazy overhead. "How much land do you have?" she asked. 4 sections, about 2,500 acres. "That's a lot." "Not really. Not out here. Water's what matters. I've got a decent creek, some springs. That's worth more than acreage." "Who are your neighbors?" His jaw tightened. "Closest is Jack Farrell, 10 miles south. He's all right, keeps to himself." "And the others?" "There's the Mescalero to the east. We don't have problems. They were here first, they'll be here last. Smart money's on making peace." He paused. "Then there's Blackwell." The way he said the name made Mara look over sharply. "Who's Blackwell?" "Trouble." Ronan's hands tightened on the reins. Cord Blackwell. Owns about half the territory, wants the other half. He's been buying up land, making offers people can't refuse, or can't survive refusing. He made you an offer 3 times, getting less polite each time. What happened to the people who said no? Ronan was quiet for long enough that Mara thought he wouldn't answer. Then, fire mostly, cattle poison, wells fouled, couple of homesteaders just disappeared. No bodies, no proof. But everyone knows. And the law? Blackwell owns the sheriff, owns the land office, owns anyone who matters in Dust Creek. He glanced at her. That's what you signed up for, just so you know. You could have mentioned that in your letter. Would you have come? Mara thought about that, about Danny's fists and Pauline's cruelty and the slow suffocation of her old life. Yeah, probably. Why? Because at least this is a different kind of dying. Ronan made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something sadder. I guess that's honest. They rode on. The town appeared suddenly the way things did in the desert. One moment nothing, the next moment buildings shimmering in the heat. Dust Creek wasn't much bigger than the town Mara had left, but it felt different, harder. The buildings looked temporary, like they expected to be abandoned any day. The people moved with a watchfulness that suggested trouble was always close. Ronan pulled the wagon up in front of a general store, set the brake. Stay close, he said quietly. People here aren't friendly. Noted. Inside the store was dim and crowded with goods that had seen better days. The proprietor, a thin man with suspicious eyes, looked up when they entered, and his expression went carefully neutral when he saw Ronan. Hail. Not friendly, not hostile, just acknowledgement. Carson, need supplies. You got money? Some. Carson's eyes slid to Mara. Who's this? My wife. The silence that followed had weight. Carson's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. Somewhere in the back of the store, someone dropped something. Your wife, Carson repeated. That a problem? No, no problem. But his eyes said otherwise. Just surprising, is all. Mara stepped forward, pulling her list from her pocket. We need flour, sugar, coffee, lard, salt, dried beans, rice if you have it, fresh vegetables if there are any, eggs, butter, yeast, baking powder, soap, both kinds, thread, needles, fabric if the price is reasonable. Carson took the list, his expression shifting from suspicion to calculation. That's going to cost. How much? He tallied it up with maddening slowness, his lips moving. $17, $20 if you want the fabric. 15, Mara said. 17. The flour's got weevils and the sugar's been sitting so long it's probably rock hard. 15. Carson looked at Ronan, who just shrugged. Looking back at Mara, Carson scowled. 16. And I throw in a bar of lye soap. Deal. While Carson gathered the supplies, Mara wandered the store. Most of it was the usual, tools, rope, seed, ammunition, but there was a corner that caught her attention. Bolts of fabric, mostly rough cotton and wool, but one bolt of calico that was actually pretty. Not fancy, but cheerful. The kind of thing you'd make a dress from if you wanted to remember what it felt like to wear something that wasn't held together by patches and prayers. She was still looking at it when a woman's voice cut through the store. Well, Ronan Hale with a woman. Didn't think I'd live to see it. Mara turned. The speaker was maybe 40, handsome in a worn way with iron gray hair and the kind of posture that said she didn't take nonsense from anyone. She wore men's trousers and a work shirt, boots caked with dried mud. Ronan's whole body had gone tense. Kate. Been a while. Kate's eyes moved to Mara, assessing. You the new wife? Mara Coulter. Kate Farrell. I run the ranch south of Ronan's place. She offered her hand, and when Mara took it, Kate's grip was firm and calloused. You know what you're getting into? Not really. Honest, I like that. Kate glanced at Ronan. You tell her about Blackwell? Some. Now tell her the rest. She deserves to know before she gets killed for being associated with you. Kate, don't Kate me. You know I'm right. She turned back to Mara. Cord Blackwell wants Ronan's land, has for years. He's got patience and money and no conscience whatsoever. People who get in his way tend to have accidents. You understand what I'm saying? I understand. And you're staying anyway? Mara thought about the house that morning, the way the light had looked coming through the windows she'd cleaned. The coffee Ronan had drunk without comment, but also without complaint. The fact that he'd fixed the wagon wheel before she even asked. "Yeah," she said. "I'm staying." Kate studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right then. You need help, you come find me. My place is 10 miles south, big cottonwood marking the turn. Can't miss it." "Thank you. Don't thank me yet." Kate tipped her hat to Ronan. "Watch yourself, Hale. Blackwell's been quiet lately. That usually means he's planning something." She left before Ronan could respond, the door banging shut behind her. "She seems nice," Mara said. "She is. Also nosy as hell. Is she right about Blackwell planning something?" Ronan was quiet, watching through the window as Kate mounted her horse. "Probably. He's been trying to get my land for 3 years. I'm the last holdout between him and complete control of the water rights in this valley. As long as I'm here, he can't close the territory." "What happens if he closes it?" "He sets the prices. Controls who can graze, who can water stock, who can cross. Basically turns every rancher within 50 miles into his tenant." He looked at her. "That's what you married into. A fight that's been going on longer than you've been here, and won't end just because you showed up." "Good thing I didn't come here expecting easy, then." Carson finished loading their supplies into the wagon, taking Ronan's money with the enthusiasm of a man handling a snake. As they climbed back onto the wagon seat, Mara caught sight of a man watching them from across the street. He was well dressed by frontier standards. Good boots, clean shirt, a hat that had probably cost more than everything Mara owned. "Who's that?" she asked quietly. Ronan didn't look. "Vance, Blackwell's foreman. He's staring. He's counting. Trying to figure out if you're a complication or an opportunity." "What's the difference?" "Whether he tries to scare you off or hurt you." Mara looked at Vance directly, meeting his eyes. He smiled, a thin, cold expression that had nothing to do with friendliness, and tipped his hat. She didn't look away first. Ronan clicked his tongue and cinders started forward, the wagon wheels crunching on the dusty street. They were almost out of town when a voice called out, "Hale, hold up!" Ronan pulled the wagon to a stop. A man was walking toward them, older, maybe 60, with a sheriff's star pinned to his vest. He moved slow, like his joints hurt, but his eyes were sharp. "Sheriff Dobbs," Ronan said, his voice carefully neutral. "Heard you got married. Wanted to see if it was true." Dobbs looked at Mara. "Ma'am." "Sheriff, you know what kind of man you married?" "I'm learning." "Then you probably heard about his wife. The first one." Mara felt Ronan go absolutely still beside her. "I heard she died." "Died." Dobbs said the word like it tasted bad. "That's one way to put it. Another way is she burned to death in a house fire. Tragic accident, the inquest said. But there were questions. Always questions when something like that happens." "Questions aren't proof," Mara said. "No, but they linger." Dobbs' smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just thought you should know. In case you start hearing talk. People remember." "People talk about all kinds of things," Mara said. "Doesn't make them true." "That's a fact." Dobbs tapped his hat. "You folks have a safe trip back. Road can be dangerous, especially for newcomers." He walked away, leaving the threat hanging in the air like smoke. Ronan didn't move for a long moment. Then he picked up the reins and got the wagon moving, his jaw so tight Mara could see the muscle jumping. They were a mile outside town before she spoke. "You want to tell me what actually happened?" "No." "I'm your wife. I should probably know if you're a murderer." "I'm not." The words came out harsh. "Emma died because I couldn't save her. That's the truth. Whether you believe it is up to you." "Did you love her?" He flinched like she'd struck him. "What kind of question is that?" "A simple one." Nothing about it was simple. His hands were white-knuckled on the reins. "I married her because her father owed me money and paid his debt with his daughter. She married me because she didn't have a choice. We made the best of it, and then she died screaming while I stood outside, unable to break down the door because the whole house was already gone. So no, it wasn't simple. None of it." Mara was quiet for a moment, absorbing that. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Pity's worse than accusation." "It's not pity. It's just Sorry that happened. Yeah, me too. They didn't talk the rest of the way back. The ranch looked even more desolate in the afternoon sun, a small, struggling outpost in an ocean of emptiness. But when Mara climbed down from the wagon and looked at it, she didn't feel the despair she probably should have. Instead, she felt something stranger, possibility. This place was broken. So was she. Maybe that meant they'd understand each other. I'll unload, Ronan said. You should rest. I should help. You've been traveling for 3 days and you scrubbed half the house last night. Rest. Mara wanted to argue, but exhaustion was winning. Fine. But tomorrow we start on the real work. Which is? Everything. She gestured at the sagging barn, the broken fences, the garden plot that was nothing but weeds and dust. All of it. This place isn't going to fix itself. You think you can fix it? I think I can try. Something shifted in Ronan's expression. Not quite hope, but maybe hope's distant cousin. All right then. We'll try. Mara went inside and collapsed on the bed without even taking off her boots. She was asleep before the sun finished setting. She woke in the deep night to the sound of Ronan's voice. At first she thought he was talking to someone, but when she crept to her door and listened, she realized he was alone. The words were too quiet to make out, but the tone was clear, anguish. The kind of pain that only came out when you thought no one was listening. Mara stood in the darkness, her hand on the door, trying to decide whether to intrude or leave him to his ghosts. In the end, she left him alone. Some things had to be carried in private, but lying back down, staring at the ceiling, she made a decision. This ranch needed work. The land needed attention. The fences needed fixing, and the barn needed shoring up, and the garden needed planting. But Ronan needed something too. Something harder to fix than a broken fence or a sagging roof. He needed to remember that he was still alive. And whether he wanted her help or not, Mara was going to make sure he did. The next morning, she woke before dawn and got started. She found tools in the barn, rusty but serviceable, and marked out the garden plot properly. The soil was hard, baked by years of neglect, but underneath the crust it was decent. It would grow things if you gave it a chance. Ronan found her 2 hours later digging post holes for a fence. What are you doing? Making a garden. She didn't stop working. Can't eat dust and hope. The ground's too hard. Then I'll work harder. He stood there for a moment, then disappeared into the barn. He came back with a pickaxe and started breaking up the hardpan ahead of her shovel, his movements economical and practiced. They worked in silence until the sun was high and brutal, then retreated to the shade of the porch. Mara poured water from the pitcher she'd left there, her hands shaking with fatigue. How long have you been alone out here? 2 years, since Emma died. No help at all? Hired a man once. He lasted 3 weeks before Blackwell's men convinced him to leave. Haven't tried since. What do they want? Really? Ronan took the water cup she offered, drained it in one long swallow. There's a railroad coming, supposed to cut through this valley in the next 2 years. Whoever controls the land controls the route. Blackwell wants to own the whole line, charge whatever he wants for access. My land sits right in the middle. If I sell, he's got a monopoly. If I don't, he'll take it anyway. He'll try. So what's the plan? Ronan looked at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. Plan? Yeah, you can't just sit here waiting for him to make a move. That's not a strategy. That's suicide. I'm open to suggestions. Mara thought about it, watching the heat shimmer on the horizon. You said you need to prove the claim. Well, what does that mean exactly? Homestead Act requires you improve the land, build structures, fence it, cultivate crops, run livestock. Do that for 5 years, the land's yours free and clear. I'm 3 years in, and Blackwell knows this. Of course he does. That's why he's been patient. He figured I'd give up or die before I made it to 5 years. But you haven't. Not yet. Then we keep going. We build, we plant, we improve every inch of this place until there's no question the claim is valid. She looked at him. Can you do that? Can you hold out 2 more years? With help? Maybe. Then that's what we do. Ronan was quiet, staring out at the land that had cost him so much already. You know this probably ends badly, right? Blackwell doesn't give up, and he doesn't fight fair. Neither do I. That almost smile again. I'm starting to see that. They went back to work. Over the next week, a routine emerged. Up before dawn. Work until the heat made it dangerous. Rest during the worst of midday. Work again until dark. Eat whatever Mara could conjure from their meager supplies. Sleep hard and dreamless. The garden took shape. Mara planted everything that had a chance of surviving: beans, squash, onions, potatoes. She hauled water until her shoulders screamed. She fought the soil and the heat and the grasshoppers that appeared like a biblical plague. Ronan worked the barn, shoring up supports, replacing rotted boards. He fixed fence line, repaired the well pump, reshoed cinder when she finally allowed it. His movements were methodical, almost meditative, like the work was the only thing keeping him tethered to the world. They spoke in fragments, their conversations broken up by labor and exhaustion. "You ever think about leaving?" Mara asked one evening, both of them too tired to move from where they'd collapsed on the porch. "Every day." "Why don't you?" "Because this is all I have left. Emma's buried here, my daughter." He stopped. "You have a daughter?" His face closed down. "Had, maybe. I don't know." "Ronan, I don't want to talk about it." Mara let it go. But she filed it away, adding it to the growing list of things Ronan Hale carried in silence. Another day, while they were hauling lumber from a collapsed outbuilding, Ronan asked, "You ever regret coming here?" "Not yet." "But you might?" "I might regret a lot of things, but at least here I get to choose what I regret." He considered that. "That's fair." By the end of the second week, Mara had calluses on top of calluses. Her skin burned dark by the sun despite her attempts at shade. Her muscles had stopped screaming and settled into a constant, tolerable ache. She was stronger than she'd ever been. Harder. And the ranch was changing too, slowly. The garden showed green shoots. The barn stood straighter. There was order where before there'd been only chaos. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Then one morning, Mara woke to the smell of smoke. She was out of bed and running before she'd fully registered what she was doing. Outside, Ronan stood in the yard, staring east where a column of black smoke rose against the dawn sky. "That's Farrell's place," he said quietly. They didn't discuss it, just hitched Cinder to the wagon and drove hard toward the smoke. Kate Farrell's ranch was burning. Not the whole thing, just the barn. But it was fully engulfed, flames reaching toward the sky like grasping hands. Kate stood in her yard with a rifle, her face black with soot, watching it burn with an expression of absolute fury. "Kate!" Ronan jumped down before the wagon had fully stopped. "What happened?" "What do you think happened?" Her voice was hoarse from smoke. "Blackwell's boys came by last night, said they wanted to talk about me selling. I said no. This is them talking back." "Anyone hurt?" "Just pride. I got the horses out. But the hay's gone. The tack, tools, everything." She finally looked at them. "They're not even pretending anymore. They just burn you out and dare you to do something about it." Mara climbed down, looking at the fire. "Did they say anything else?" "Said next time it might be the house." Kate spat into the dust. "Said I should think real careful about my choices, like I have any." "You do," Ronan said. "You can fight back." "With what?" "I'm one woman against Blackwell's whole operation. Sheriff won't help. Land office won't listen. Who's going to stand with me?" "We are," Mara said. Both Kate and Ronan turned to stare at her. "We're standing with you," Mara repeated. "All of us who haven't sold. We band together, watch each other's places, document what Blackwell does, get evidence, go over the local law if we have to, go to the territorial governor, the federal marshals, whoever will listen." "They won't listen," Kate said bitterly. "Blackwell owns everyone." "Then we make them listen." Mara could feel something building in her chest. The same cold anger she'd felt sitting on that boulder back home. The same determination that had brought her here. "We can't fight him alone, but together, maybe we can make enough noise that someone with actual authority pays attention." Kate looked at Ronan. "She always this naive?" "I'm starting to think it's not naive," Ronan said slowly. "It's just different. Different gets you killed out here." "So does doing nothing," Mara shot back. "Your barn is burning, Kate. What's left to lose?" Silence. The fire crackled and roared, eating through the last of the structure. The roof collapsed inward with a shower of sparks. "All right," Kate said finally. "All right, we'll try it your way. But when this goes bad, and it will, I'm going to say I told you so. Fair enough. They stayed until the fire burned itself out, then helped Kate salvage what little could be saved from the wreckage. It wasn't much. Twisted metal, ruined tools, the charred frame of what had been a good barn. On the ride back, Ronan was quiet. Mara could feel him thinking. You meant what you said, he said finally, about standing together. Yeah. You know that makes you a target, right? Blackwell will see you as the one stirring up resistance. Good, let him see me. Maybe that means he'll stop sneaking around burning barns and actually show his face. Mara, I'm not backing down, Ronan. Not from him, not from this. She looked at him. If you want me to be quiet and meek and stay out of the way, you married the wrong woman. He almost smiled. I'm starting to figure that out. They got back to the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked too much like fire. Mara started dinner while Ronan tended to Cinder, both of them moving through familiar routines. But everything felt different now. The fight had been abstract before. Something happening to someone else, somewhere else. Now it was real. Now it was close. And Mara knew with absolute certainty that things were about to get much worse before they had any chance of getting better. If they got better at all. The riders came 3 days after Kate's barn burned. Mara was in the garden, her hands deep in soil, when she heard Ronan's voice cut sharp across the yard. Mara, inside. Now. She looked up. 4 men on horseback sat at the edge of the property, watching. Even from a distance, she could feel the threat coming off them like heat shimmer. I said now. Ronan's hand was on the rifle he'd started carrying everywhere. Mara stood slowly, wiping dirt from her palms. She didn't run. Running would look like fear, and fear was what they wanted. But she walked steady to the house, feeling their eyes track her every step. Inside, she went to the window. Ronan stood in the yard, the rifle loose in his hands, but ready. Not pointing it, not yet. But the promise was there. One of the riders dismounted. He was the same man Mara had seen in town, Vance, Blackwell's foreman. Up close, he looked even less friendly. There was a meanness to his mouth, a coldness in how he moved. Hail, Vance's voice carried clear to the house. Been a while. Not long enough. That's unfriendly. Here I am, trying to do business in a civilized manner. Your civilized manner burned Kate Farrell's barn to the ground. Vance smiled. Now that's a serious accusation. You got proof of that? I got eyes. Eyes can be wrong. Fires happen, especially when people don't maintain their property proper. He looked around the ranch with exaggerated interest. Speaking of which, this place is looking almost respectable. That new wife of yours got you motivated? State your business or get off my land. Touchy. Vance pulled a paper from his jacket. Mr. Blackwell asked me to deliver another offer. Very generous one. $15 an acre. That's more than fair for land this rough. I'm not selling. You should reconsider. Mr. Blackwell's patience isn't infinite. Neither's mine. Vance's smile thinned. You're making this harder than it needs to be. All Mr. Blackwell wants is to build something here. Progress. Prosperity. Railroad's coming, Hale. This whole valley is going to change. You can be part of that change, profit from it, or you can be left behind. I'll take my chances. Will you? Vance's eyes drifted to the house, and Mara felt the weight of his gaze through the window. What about your wife? She know what she signed up for? Married to a man too stubborn to see reason? Ronan's whole body went tight. Leave her out of this. Hard to do when she's making herself part of it. Heard she's been talking to Kate Farrell, talking about organizing, resistance. Vance said the word like it was funny. That's not smart, Hale. Gets people hurt. Is that a threat? It's friendly advice. Didn't sound friendly. Vance folded the paper, tucked it back in his jacket. Mr. Blackwell gave me this to deliver with the offer. Said you might need some visual encouragement. He whistled. One of the other riders tossed something into the yard. It landed with a heavy thump in the dust. A dead dog. Young. Its neck broken clean. Found that on the road to Farrell's place, Vance said conversationally. Coyotes probably got it. Dangerous out here. Lots of things can hurt you if you're not careful. Mara felt something cold settle in her stomach. Not fear exactly. Rage, maybe. Or something colder and more useful. Ronan's knuckles were white on the rifle. Get off my land. We're going. But Hale? Vance remounted, his movements lazy and confident. Think about that offer. Really think. Because next time we come back, we might not be so polite. They rode off, taking their time, making it clear they weren't afraid of Ronan or his rifle or anything else. Ronan stood in the yard long after they'd disappeared, staring at the dead dog. Mara came out slowly. Ronan, don't. His voice was rough. Just don't. We should bury it. I'll do it. He wouldn't look at her. You should stay inside from now on. When you're working outside, keep the rifle close. I'm not hiding. I'm not asking you to hide. I'm asking you to stay alive. He finally turned to her, and the look on his face was something beyond anger. It was fear, raw and honest and terrible. You understand what they just said? They'll kill you, Mara. To get to me, to make a point, to send a message, doesn't matter. You're a target now. So are you. I've been a target for 3 years. I know how to live with it. You don't. Then teach me. He stared at her. You're serious? You think I came all this way just to hide in the house while they burn everything down around us? Mara's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. I told Kate we'd stand together. I meant it. And if Blackwell wants to scare me off, he's going to have to do better than a dead dog. Jesus, Mara. Show me how to shoot that rifle. Show me how to watch for riders. Show me whatever I need to know. But don't ask me to be small and quiet and hope they forget I exist. She moved closer, looking up at him. That's the woman I was before I came here. I'm not going back to being her. Something shifted in Ronan's expression. The fear didn't leave, but something else joined it. Respect, maybe, or recognition. All right, he said quietly. All right, we'll do it your way, but you listen when I tell you something's too dangerous. Deal? Deal. He held out his hand. Mara took it. His grip was warm, solid, calloused from work. They buried the dog together at the edge of the property, in a spot where wildflowers grew. It seemed important somehow. A small defiance against meaningless cruelty. That night, Ronan taught Mara to shoot. They set up bottles on the fence line as the sun set, and Ronan showed her how to hold the rifle, how to sight, how to breathe and squeeze instead of jerking the trigger. It's going to kick, he warned. Don't fight it. Let it happen. The first shot nearly knocked her on her ass. The second was better. By the 10th, she was starting to understand the rhythm of it. You're not bad, Ronan said, surprised. I'm motivated. They practiced until dark made it impossible to see the targets, then sat on the porch passing a canteen of water back and forth. Tell me about your daughter, Mara said. Ronan went still. Why? Because you mentioned her once and then shut down. And because if we're really doing this, standing against Blackwell together, I should know what I'm fighting for. What you're fighting for. He was quiet so long Mara thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he started talking. Her name's Sarah. She'd be 6 now. Maybe 7. I lose track of time out here. His voice was rough, unpracticed at this kind of confession. Emma was pregnant when we got married. The baby wasn't mine. Father was some man back east who'd promised marriage and then disappeared. Emma's father was ashamed, said I could have her and the debt forgiveness if I'd take the child too. So I did. Did you love her? Sarah, I mean. From the first moment I saw her, she had these eyes, big and dark and curious about everything. Used to follow me around the ranch, asking a million questions. He smiled, but it was painful to watch. She'd collect rocks, had a whole pile of them by the porch. Each one was special for some reason only she understood. What happened? The smile died. The fire happened. I got Sarah out first, told her to run to the barn and stay there, went back for Emma, but the smoke was too thick, the heat too much. Door wouldn't open. Something had fallen against it from inside. I tried. I broke my shoulder trying to break that door down. But it was already too late. Mara waited. There was more. She could feel it. When the fire finally died enough for me to search the ruins, I couldn't find Emma. Couldn't find anything, really. Just ash and ruin. Sarah was gone, too. I thought maybe she'd run. Got scared and ran. I looked for days, weeks. Nothing. His hands were fists. Then I heard the rumors that Blackwell's men had been seen near the property that night, that maybe the fire wasn't an accident, that maybe they'd taken Sarah to use as leverage. Did you confront Blackwell? I tried. He denied everything, said he was sorry for my loss, offered to buy the land at a fair price to ease my burden. When I refused, he got less sympathetic, said maybe if I'd been a better husband, a better father, my family would still be alive. Mara felt fury rise in her throat like bile. And the sheriff did nothing? Sheriff said there was no evidence of foul play, said children wander off sometimes, especially after trauma, suggested I was letting grief make me paranoid. Ronan's laugh was bitter. Maybe I am. Maybe she did just run. Maybe she's dead in a canyon somewhere and I'll never know. But I can't stop thinking, what if she's alive? What if Blackwell has her somewhere and I gave up looking? You didn't give up. You're still here, still fighting him. For what? The land? It's just dirt and rock and water. It's home. And if Sarah's alive, if she ever tries to come back, you'll be here. Mara put her hand on his arm. That's not nothing, Ronan. He looked at her hand, then at her face. You really believe that? I believe we don't give up on the people we love. Ever. Something happened in that moment. Something shifted between them. The air felt different, charged. Ronan raised his hand, hesitated, then gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind Mara's ear. His touch was careful, like he was afraid she'd shatter. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. Do what? Care about someone again? I've spent 2 years teaching myself not to feel anything because feeling meant remembering and remembering was unbearable. But you show up and you're stubborn and fearless and you make me think maybe what? Maybe I'm not as dead as I thought I was. Mara's breath caught. She'd married this man knowing almost nothing about him, expecting nothing beyond survival and hard work. She hadn't expected this, hadn't prepared for the way her heart was suddenly racing. Ronan! The sound of hoofbeats cut through the night. They were both on their feet instantly, Ronan grabbing the rifle. But it was just one rider, moving fast, coming from the south. Kate Farrell pulled up hard, her horse lathered and breathing hard. They hit the Carmichaels, she gasped. Burned them out completely. House and barn both. Family barely got out alive. When? 2 hours ago, maybe 3. I came straight here. Kate's eyes were wild. They're not waiting anymore, Ronan. They're not being subtle. Blackwell's making his move. Mara felt her stomach drop. How many families between here and the Carmichaels? 4, maybe 5. If they're hitting everyone who hasn't sold, we need to warn them, Mara said. Right now, before Blackwell's men get there first. Ronan was already moving. Kate, you take the Hendricks place and the McCoys. Mara and I will take the Johnsons and the Ramirez family. We meet back at dawn, figure out what's next. What if they're already hit? Then we help them pick up the pieces, move. Kate wheeled her horse and was gone, disappearing into the darkness. Ronan was saddling Cinder, his movements quick and practiced. Mara grabbed supplies, water, bandages, the rifle, her mind racing through scenarios, most of them bad. Can you ride hard? Ronan asked. I'll manage. This is going to be dangerous. Everything's dangerous. Let's go. They rode into the night, pushing Cinder harder than was probably wise, but speed mattered more than caution now. The desert at night was a different world, stars so bright they cast actual shadows, the temperature dropping fast, sounds carrying in strange ways. The Johnsons' place came into view first. No smoke, no fire. Lights on in the windows. Ronan pulled up short. Wait here. Like hell. Mara shot. We don't have time to argue. I'm coming. He muttered something that might have been a curse or a prayer, then dismounted. They approached the house carefully, Ronan's hand on his pistol. Bill Johnson opened the door before they could knock, his own rifle leveled at them. Easy, Bill. It's Hale. Ronan? Bill lowered the rifle slightly. What are you doing here? Warning you, Blackwell's men are hitting properties, burning out anyone who hasn't sold. Carmichael's got hit tonight. You need to be ready. Bill's face went pale. My family, get them to safety. Now. Pack what you can't lose and get out. Come back in daylight with help. Where do we go? Kate Farrell's place. Or mine. Doesn't matter. Just go. Bill didn't waste time arguing. He started shouting orders to his wife, his kids scrambling to gather essentials. Mara and Ronan didn't wait to see them off. The Ramirez place was another 5 miles east, and every minute counted. They found it already burning. The house was fully engulfed, flames clawing at the sky. The barn was smoking, not quite caught, but close. And in the yard, the Ramirez family stood huddled together, watching their life burn. Ronan and Mara dismounted, running to them. "Anyone hurt?" Ronan demanded. Carlos Ramirez shook his head, his arm around his wife. His children pressed against them. "We got out. That's all that matters." "Did you see who did it?" 4 men, maybe 5. They rode in, threw torches, rode out, laughing like it was funny. Carlos's voice broke. 20 years I've been building this place. 20 years. Gone in 20 minutes. His wife, Maria, was crying silently, her face buried against her husband's shoulder. The children just stared at the flames, too shocked to process what they were seeing. Mara felt helpless. There was nothing they could do. No water supply big enough to fight a fire this size. No way to save the structure. But they could save the people. "Come with us," Mara said. "We'll make room. You can stay until you figure out what's next." Carlos looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. "Why would you do that?" "Because Blackwell's trying to break us all. Separately, we can't fight him. Together, maybe we can." She looked at the family, tired, scared, homeless. "You don't have to decide now. Just come. Be safe. Figure out the rest tomorrow." Maria lifted her head. "You're Hale's wife?" "Yes. The one who married him knowing what people say. I married him knowing I needed a chance at a different life. Everything else I'm learning as I go." Something shifted in Maria's expression. She looked at her husband. "Carlos, we should go with them." "Maria? What else do we have? Pride? Pride doesn't keep the children warm." She turned to Mara. "We'll come. Thank you." They salvaged what they could from the barn before it caught fully. Some tools, a few personal items, blankets. Then they started the journey back to Ronan's ranch, moving slower now, with a whole family in tow. The eastern sky was starting to gray when they finally arrived. Kate was already there, along with the Hendricks family, another couple with 3 kids, all looking shell-shocked. "The McCoy's place was already gone," Kate said grimly. "I found them on the road, sent them to my place. How many did you get?" Johnson's got out ahead of the fire. Ramirez family lost everything, but made it out alive. Kate counted in her head. "That's 3 families burned out in one night, 4 if you count mine. And how many did he miss?" "Just us, the ones here." "So now what?" Mara looked at the gathered families, exhausted, scared, angry. At Ronan, standing apart with that look of barely controlled fury. At Kate, who'd been fighting this fight long before Mara arrived. "Now we stop running," Mara said. "Now we document everything. Every fire, every threat, every property Blackwell's damaged. We get statements from everyone. We gather evidence, and we take it to someone who actually gives a damn about the law." "Who?" Kate's laugh was hollow. "The sheriff's in Blackwell's pocket, the land office, too. Who's left?" "Federal marshals, territorial governor, someone above Blackwell's reach." "That could take months. We don't have months. We don't even have weeks. Then we make time." Mara's voice was harder than she'd ever heard it. "We fortify. We watch each other's places. We make it too expensive for Blackwell to keep hitting us. And we make enough noise that someone with actual authority has to pay attention." Carlos Ramirez spoke up. "You're talking about war." "I'm talking about survival. Blackwell started this. We're just refusing to die quietly." Silence. Everyone looking at each other, weighing their options, calculating their chances. Finally, Bill Johnson stepped forward. "I'm in. They burned me out once before back in Missouri. Drove me west looking for a fresh start. I'll be damned if I run again." "Me too," Maria Ramirez said. "My children deserve better than being terrorized off their own land." One by one, they agreed. Not because they thought they'd win, but because the alternative, giving up, giving in, letting Blackwell take everything, was worse than fighting. Mara felt something fierce and bright bloom in her chest. This was what strength looked like. Not perfection, not fearlessness, Just ordinary people deciding they'd had enough. All right, Ronan said, his voice carrying authority. First thing, we secure this place. Rotating watch, 2 people at all times. No one works alone outside. We rig up alarm systems, bells, tripwires, anything that gives us warning if riders approach. Kate, your place needs the same. Already working on it. Good. Second, we document everything. Mara's right about that. Every incident, every threat, every bit of property damage. We get it on paper with signatures and dates. Who's going to deliver it? Kate asked. Soon as anyone rides out, Blackwell's men will know. They'll intercept them. Then we send someone Blackwell won't expect, someone who can move fast and quiet. Everyone looked at Mara. No, Ronan said immediately. Absolutely not. Why not? Mara met his eyes. I'm new here. Blackwell's men don't know me as well as they know the rest of you. I can move through their territory without raising as much suspicion. You're a woman alone in hostile country. That's suicide. I'm also the only one here who's got nothing to lose. You all have families, property, lives built over years. I've been here 3 weeks. If something happens to me, you can keep fighting. But if something happens to you, Ronan, or you, Kate, the whole thing falls apart. She has a point, Kate said reluctantly. That doesn't make it a good idea. Ronan's jaw was tight. I won't risk you like that. It's not your choice. It's mine. Mara's voice softened. You told me yesterday you didn't know if you could care about someone again. Well, I'm telling you now, this is what caring looks like. It's messy and terrifying, and it means watching people you care about take risks. But it's also trusting them to make their own decisions. Ronan stared at her, and Mara could see the war happening behind his eyes. Fear fighting with respect. The need to protect battling with the knowledge that she was right. If you do this, he said finally, you take the fastest horse. You carry a weapon, and you don't take unnecessary risks. Straight there, straight back. No detours, no heroics. Agreed. And you wait until we have all the documentation ready. I'm not sending you out there half prepared. How long will that take? A week, maybe 2. We might not have 2 weeks. Then we work fast. Ronan looked at the assembled families. Everyone who's willing, we start writing down what happened. Dates, times, names of anyone you recognized. Property damage assessed as best you can. Anything that proves Blackwell's behind this. We make our case ironclad. They worked through the morning and into the afternoon. People taking turns sleeping and writing, watching and planning. Mara's small ranch house became a command center. Families crowded into every available space. It was chaos. It was exhausting. It was also the first time since arriving that Mara felt like she was actually building something that mattered. That night, after the children had finally fallen asleep and the adults had collapsed into whatever rest they could manage, Mara found Ronan on the porch. He was looking east, toward where the Ramirez place still smoldered in the distance. She sat beside him without speaking. I'm scared, he said finally. That's not something I say, ever. But I'm terrified that I'm going to lose you the same way I lost Emma, the same way I lost Sarah. You won't. You can't promise that. No. But I can promise I'll fight like hell to come back. She took his hand. And I can promise that whatever happens, it'll be my choice, my risk, not something you forced on me or failed to prevent. It's not as comforting as you think it is. I know. They sat in silence, hands linked, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere out there, Blackwell was planning his next move. His men were riding, burning, terrorizing. The whole territory was holding its breath, waiting to see who'd break first. But here, on this porch, with these people sleeping inside and this man sitting beside her, Mara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Direction. The sense that what she did mattered. It might get her killed. But at least she'd die as herself, not as the invisible woman everyone had spent 26 years forgetting existed. At least she'd die fighting. The storm came on the 8th day. Mara saw it building all morning, dark clouds massing on the western horizon like an army gathering for battle. The air went strange and heavy, pressing down until even breathing felt like work. The animals sensed it too. Cinder paced the paddock, head high and nostrils flared. Birds disappeared. Even the insects went quiet. We need to secure everything, Ronan said, watching the sky. Now. They'd spent the past week fortifying the ranch, everyone working until their hands bled. The barn had new supports. The fences were reinforced. They'd built a makeshift bunkhouse from salvaged lumber for the families who'd lost everything. The garden, Mara's garden, was finally starting to thrive, green shoots pushing through the stubborn earth. All of it was about to be tested.
How bad? Mara asked.
Bad enough. Ronan was already moving, shouting orders. Carlos, help me get the livestock into the barn. Bill, check every shutter, every window. Kate, round up the children, get them inside. The wind hit first, not gradual, not building. Just suddenly there, roaring across the desert like something alive and furious. It tore at the newly repaired roof, ripped through the garden, sent loose tools flying like weapons. Then came the rain. Mara had seen storms before. Growing up, she'd watched spring thunderstorms roll through with their drama and flash. But this was different. This was biblical. Water came down in sheets so thick you couldn't see 10 feet. Lightning cracked close enough to feel, thunder shaking the walls. Inside the house, people huddled together. Maria Ramirez held her children close, their faces pressed against her. Bill Johnson's wife was praying quietly, her lips moving without sound. Kate stood by the window watching the chaos with a grim expression. The barn, she said suddenly. Ronan and Carlos are still out there. Mara's heart lurched. She moved to the door. Don't. Kate grabbed her arm. You go out in this, you'll get killed. They're out there. They're grown men who know what they're doing. You running out into a lightning storm doesn't help anyone. Mara wanted to argue, but Kate was right. She pressed her face to the window instead, trying to see through the deluge. Nothing. Just water and darkness and the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated everything in stark white before plunging it back into shadow. Minutes crawled by like hours. Then the door burst open and Ronan stumbled in, soaked through, Carlos right behind him. They were both breathing hard, Carlos's arm hanging at an odd angle. He got kicked, Ronan said before anyone could ask. Horse panicked. Caught him in the shoulder. Maria rushed forward. How bad? Probably dislocated. Hurts like hell, but I'll live. Carlos managed a weak smile. Could have been worse. Ronan stripped off his soaked shirt, water still streaming from his hair. Livestock secure, barns holding. For now. For now, Bill echoed. The roof's compromised. I patched what I could, but if this keeps up... He didn't finish. Didn't need to. The storm raged for 6 hours. 6 hours of wind that sounded like screaming. Rain that found every weakness in the walls, every gap in the roof. Lightning so constant it was almost daylight. And thunder that shook the ground like artillery. Somewhere in the third hour, part of the barn roof tore away. They heard it go, a sound like something dying. Ronan swore viciously and headed for the door. You can't, Mara blocked his path. The animals... We'll have to manage. You go out there and you die. Then what? We lose you and the barn both? His eyes were wild. I can't just sit here. Yes, you can. Because that's what we all have to do. Wait it out, survive it, fix the damage after. He looked like he wanted to fight her on it. But something in her expression must have convinced him, because he stepped back, fists clenched, jaw tight with helpless fury. They waited. When the storm finally broke, the silence was almost worse than the noise. Everyone stood frozen, afraid to move, afraid of what they'd find. Ronan opened the door. The devastation was total. The barn's roof was half gone, timbers scattered across the yard like kindling. The bunkhouse they'd built had collapsed entirely, just a pile of soaked lumber and broken dreams. The garden was destroyed, plants ripped out, soil washed away. Everything Mara had worked for reduced to muddy ruin. The fence line was down in a dozen places. 2 of the outbuildings had simply vanished, torn apart by wind and scattered to hell. Mara walked through the wreckage in a daze. This was worse than anything Blackwell had done. Nature didn't care about their determination or their unity. It just took what it wanted and left them to deal with the consequences. Mara, Ronan's voice was hollow. The creek. She turned. The creek that ran through the property, their water source, the thing that made the land valuable, had jumped its banks. The flooding had carved new channels, destroyed the irrigation she'd been working on, and worst of all, it had undermined the foundation of the house. The south wall was cracked, pulling away from the rest of the structure. How long do we have? Mara asked, her voice distant even to her own ears. Before it collapses? Days. Maybe a week if we're lucky. Ronan looked at the damage, at the families standing in the mud, at everything they'd built lying in ruins. We're finished. Don't say that. Look around, Mara. We can't fix this. We don't have the materials, the time, or the money. Blackwell wins. He doesn't even need to burn us out. Nature did it for him. Kate sloshed through the mud toward them. The livestock mostly made it, lost 2 chickens and 1 of the goats, but the feed is soaked through, ruined. How much do we have left? Maybe a week's worth if we ration hard. Bill Johnson joined them, his expression grim. The well's contaminated. All that runoff, all that mud. Water's undrinkable. Can we dig a new one? Not fast enough. Carlos approached, cradling his injured arm. My family. We have nothing. Again. I can't. His voice broke. I can't ask them to go through this again. One by one, the other families gathered, wet, exhausted, looking to Ronan and Mara for answers they didn't have. Maybe Blackwell's offer isn't so bad, someone said quietly. At least we'd have something. Money to start over somewhere else. Somewhere he can't reach us, another voice added. Mara felt the group's resolve crumbling, felt her own certainty fracturing. They'd been so determined, so sure that unity and stubbornness would be enough. But standing in the ruins of everything they'd worked for, that determination felt childish, naive. We should vote, Bill said. Everyone gets a say. We either fight or we fold. But we decide together. Ronan looked at Mara. In his eyes, she saw defeat, resignation, the same look he'd probably worn after Emma died, after Sarah disappeared. The look of a man who'd stopped believing things could get better. I need to walk, Mara said abruptly. Mara, but she was already moving, slogging through mud toward the edge of the property. She needed space, air, distance from the wreckage and the despair. She walked until she reached the high point overlooking the valley. From here you could see for miles. The red rock formations, the distant mountains, the way the desert stretched out forever in all directions. It was still beautiful. Even flooded and storm-ravaged, it was beautiful. Mara sank down onto a boulder, finally letting herself feel the full weight of everything. The exhaustion, the fear, the crushing sense of failure. She'd thought she was strong enough for this. Thought determination and refusal to quit would be enough. But maybe Danny had been right all along. Maybe she was just a girl with a mule's face and delusions of competence. Thought I'd find you here. Mara didn't turn. Kate sat down beside her, groaning as her joints protested. You planning to give up? Kate asked. I don't know what I'm planning anymore. That's honest, at least. Kate was quiet for a moment. You know what I see when I look at you? Someone who bit off more than she could chew. Someone who reminds me of myself 20 years ago. Young, stupid, certain I could fix everything through sheer force of will. Kate smiled, but it was sad. I was wrong, of course. You can't fix everything. Sometimes the world just breaks you, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, but here's the thing. Getting broken doesn't mean you're finished. It just means you have to decide what kind of broken you want to be. The kind that stays down? Or the kind that gets up anyway, even knowing you might get broken again? Mara looked at her. You ever think about quitting? About just walking away? Every damn day, especially after my barn burned. Especially this morning, looking at all that damage. Kate picked up a pebble, turned it over in her calloused fingers. But then I think about Blackwell's face when he realizes I'm still here, still fighting, and that spite is sometimes enough to keep me going one more day. That's not much of a reason. It's the reason I've got. You find what works. Kate stood, her knees cracking. For what it's worth, I think you're the best thing that's happened to Ronan in years. Maybe ever. You made him remember what it's like to hope. That's not nothing. She walked away, leaving Mara alone with the view and her thoughts. The sun was starting to set, painting the storm-washed sky in shades of orange and purple. Mara thought about her old life. About Danny's cruelty and Pauline's pity. About scrubbing other people's floors and being invisible. She thought about the house that was slowly collapsing, the garden that was destroyed, the families looking to her for answers she didn't have. And she thought about Ronan's face that first night, when she'd said the house would do. The surprise, the faint hope. Mara stood up. She didn't have a plan, didn't have answers, but she had something else, something that had brought her this far and might carry her a little further. She had stubbornness. When Mara got back to the ranch, everyone was gathered in the yard. Ronan stood apart from the group, his arms crossed, his expression closed off. "We were waiting for you," Bill said, "before we vote." "Don't vote yet." Mara moved to the center of the group. "I want to say something first."
Mara, we've already.
Ronan started. "Just listen." She looked at each face in turn. "You're right, the damage is catastrophic. We can't fix it all. We probably can't even fix most of it, and if we stay, we might lose everything anyway." "Then you agree we should sell?" Carlos asked. "No, I agree it's hopeless if we approach it the same way we have been." Mara took a breath. "We've been trying to restore what was, but what wasn't working anyway. Ronan was barely surviving out here alone. The rest of you were isolated, easy targets. We need to think different." "Different how?" Kate asked. "We stop trying to make individual ranches work. We pool everything, combine the properties into one operation, share resources, share labor, share the profits when there are any." The silence was profound. "That's..." Bill struggled for words. "That's not how it's done." "No, it's not. But the way it's done isn't working. Blackwell picks us off one by one because we're separate, weak. But together? Together we might actually have a chance." "You're talking about giving up ownership," someone said. "I'm talking about partnership, real partnership. Not you work for me or I work for you. Equal stakes, equal say." Mara turned to Ronan. "It's your land legally, your call. But if you're willing to share it, really share it, we could build something Blackwell can't destroy. Something that survives because we're all invested in each other's success." Ronan stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "You want me to just give away my land?" "I want you to bet on people instead of property. I want you to trust that we're stronger together than we are apart." She moved closer to him. "You told me you sent for a wife because you needed help. Well, here's your help. All of us. But you have to let us in, really in." "That's insane." "Probably. But so was marrying a stranger and riding into the desert. So was standing up to Blackwell in the first place." "We're way past sane, Ronan. We're in survival territory now." He looked at the gathered families, at Kate, who was watching with sharp interest, at Carlos and Maria and their children, at Bill and his wife. "This would make you all targets," he said quietly. "Equal partners means equal risk. Blackwell won't just come after me. He'll come after all of you." "He already is," Maria said. "At least this way we face him together." "And we'd need to prove the claim," Ronan continued. "Make improvements. The homestead requirements don't go away just because we're pooling resources." "Then we work smarter," Mara said. "We fix what's fixable. We salvage what we can from the damaged buildings. We plant what'll grow fast. We make the next 2 years count." "2 years of hell," Kate muttered. "Fighting Blackwell, fighting the land, fighting probably each other because humans are terrible at cooperation." "You in anyway?" Mara asked. Kate grinned suddenly, fierce and wild. "Hell yes, I'm in. I'm too old and too mean to quit now." One by one, the others agreed. Not because they thought it would work, but because the alternative was giving up, and none of them had come this far just to surrender. Ronan was the last to speak. He looked at Mara for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. "You're completely insane," he said finally. "I married you, didn't I?" His mouth twitched, almost smiled. "Fair point." He turned to the group. "All right. We do it Mara's way. Pool the resources, equal partnership. We build one operation strong enough to withstand whatever Blackwell throws at us." "And when he throws everything," Bill asked, "then we throw everything back." They worked through the night, sorting through the wreckage, salvaging what could be saved. It wasn't much. Lumber that wasn't too damaged, tools that still functioned, personal items people couldn't bear to lose. But as they worked, something shifted. The desperation turned into determination. The isolation transformed into cooperation. People who'd been strangers a week ago worked side by side, sharing the load. By morning, they had a plan. Not a good one, not a safe one, but a plan nonetheless. They'd rebuild the barn first, They needed shelter for the animals more than anything. Then shore up the house foundation before it collapsed completely. The bunkhouse could wait. The garden would have to be replanted from scratch, and someone would need to ride to the territorial capital soon. Before Blackwell made another move, someone would need to carry their evidence, their testimonies, their desperate plea for help to someone with the authority to actually do something. Mara knew who that someone had to be. She waited until Ronan was alone, checking the foundation damage in the growing light. "I'm leaving in 2 days," she said. He didn't look surprised, just resigned. "For the capital. We have the documentation ready. We have testimony from everyone who's been burned out. If I don't go now, we might not get another chance. You'll be riding through Blackwell's territory alone. I'll be riding fast and careful. Mara," he turned to face her fully. "I can't lose you. I know this marriage isn't what either of us expected, but you matter. To this place, to these people." His voice dropped. "To me. Then trust me to come back." That's not how trust works. No, trust is letting someone take a risk even when it terrifies you. Trust is believing they're capable even when you want to wrap them in cotton and keep them safe. Mara stepped closer. "You've spent 2 years trying not to care about anything because caring meant it could hurt you. But you can't build a life on that. You can't build anything on that. I built this ranch. You built a monument to guilt and grief. That's not the same as a life." She put her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and fast beneath her palm. "I'm going because someone has to, and it should be me because I've got the least to lose and the most to prove. Not to you, not to them, to myself." Ronan covered her hand with his. "What if something happens? Then you keep fighting. You keep these people together. You finish what we started. That's not comforting. I know, but it's all I've got." He pulled her close suddenly, wrapping his arms around her like he could protect her through sheer force of will. Mara let herself have the moment, pressed against his chest, feeling safe, even though nothing was safe anymore. 2 days, he said into her hair. "Promise me you'll prepare. Really prepare." "I promise." "And promise me you'll come back." "I'll try." "That's not good enough. It's all anyone can promise. But I'll try like hell, Ronan. For this place. For these people." She pulled back enough to look at him. "For you." He kissed her then. Not gentle, not practiced. Desperate and real and tasting like fear and hope mixed together. Mara kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into the contact. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Ronan rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling in love with you," he said quietly. "I didn't think I could. Didn't think I had it in me anymore. But I am." Mara's heart stumbled. "Ronan, I needed you to know, before you leave, just in case. Don't talk like that. Someone has to say the true things." He straightened, his jaw set. "I'm falling in love with you, Mara Coulter. And when you come back, because you're stubborn enough to actually pull this off, we're going to figure out what that means. What if I'm falling too? Then we'll figure it out together." They stood in the wreckage of the storm, surrounded by destruction and impossibility, and for just a moment it felt like maybe they could actually survive this. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Kate taught Mara the fastest routes to the capital, the landmarks to watch for, the places where water could be found. Carlos, despite his injured shoulder, showed her how to ride low and fast, how to preserve a horse's strength over long distances. Bill's wife packed food that would last. Hardtack, jerky, dried fruit. Not enough for comfort, but enough for survival. And Ronan worked on the horse. Not Cinder. She was too recognizable, too associated with the ranch. Instead, he traded with a passing ranch hand for a nondescript bay gelding, young and fast, with endurance to spare. "His name's Flint," Ronan said, introducing Mara to the horse. "He's not friendly, but he's reliable. Sounds like someone else I know." That almost smile. "Watch yourself, or I'll take it back." On the morning she was set to leave, Mara woke before dawn. She dressed in her most practical clothes, braided her hair tight, and checked her supplies one final time. The saddlebags held everything she needed: food, water, ammunition, and most importantly, the carefully documented evidence of Blackwell's crimes. Testimony from every family he'd burned out. Dates and times, property damage assessed and witnessed, even a few names of his men who'd been recognized during the attacks. It wasn't proof beyond all doubt, but it was enough to demand an investigation, enough to force someone with actual authority to pay attention. Outside, the ranch was stirring, people emerging from the barn where they'd been sleeping, children rubbing sleep from their eyes, adults moving with the exhaustion of those who'd been working too hard for too long. Ronan was with Flint, making final adjustments to the saddle. "Everything's secure," he said without looking at her. "Food's accessible. Rifles loaded. Extra ammunition in the left saddlebag." "Ronan." He finally looked at her. His eyes were haunted. "I'll be back," Mara said. "You better be." She kissed him quickly, aware of everyone watching, not caring. Then she swung up into the saddle. Kate approached, handing up a canteen. "Straight east until you hit the river. Follow it north. Capital's 3 days hard ride. Don't stop except to water the horse. Don't trust anyone you meet on the road. And for the love of all that's holy, don't try to be a hero. No heroics, got it." Maria came forward with her children. "You bring back help," she said fiercely. "You bring back someone who'll make Blackwell pay for what he's done." "I'll try." "Don't try. Do." Mara looked at all of them, these people who'd become something more than allies over the past weeks, who'd become a kind of family, broken and strange, but real. Then she looked at Ronan one last time. "Hold the line," she said, "until you get back." She turned Flint toward the rising sun and kicked him into a run. The desert opened up before her like a promise and a threat, and Mara rode into it carrying the weight of everyone's hope on her shoulders. Behind her, Ronan stood watching until she disappeared from sight, his hands clenched at his sides, his jaw tight with the effort of not calling her back. "She'll make it," Kate said quietly beside him. "How do you know?" "Because she's too stubborn to die. You picked well, Hale." "I didn't pick her. She picked this." "Same difference." Kate turned back to the ranch. "Come on, we've got work to do. And when she gets back, I want her to see we didn't fall apart the minute she left." Ronan took one last look at the empty horizon, then followed Kate back to the wreckage they were trying to rebuild into something worth saving. 3 days, he told himself. She said 3 days. He could hold out that long. He had to. Mara rode hard for 6 hours before she allowed Flint to slow. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, red rock and scrub grass and heat that pressed down like a physical weight. She followed Kate's directions precisely, east until the river, then north. The landmarks appeared exactly as described, a twisted juniper marking the turn, 3 red boulders stacked like broken teeth, a dry wash that cut through the landscape like a scar. By midday, the heat was brutal. Mara stopped long enough to water Flint and wet a cloth to cool her own neck. The silence was total, except for the wind and the occasional cry of a hawk circling overhead. She was back in the saddle and moving when she saw the dust. 3 riders, maybe 4, coming from the west at an angle that would intercept her course. Too far to identify, but close enough to be a problem. Mara's hand went to the rifle. She urged Flint faster, angling north toward rougher terrain where a single rider might lose pursuers. The gelding responded, his strides lengthening, ears pinned back. The riders changed course, matching her movement. They were following her deliberately. Mara's mind raced. She could run. Flint was fast and relatively fresh. But the other horses looked strong, and there were more of them. They could trade off, wear her down. Or she could stand and fight, but 4 against 1 were terrible odds, even if she was a decent shot. The land rose slightly ahead, broken rock formations creating a maze of passages. Mara made for them, hoping for somewhere defensible, somewhere she could make a stand if it came to that. She was halfway through the rocks when a voice called out, "Hold up there!" Mara pulled Flint to a stop, the rifle already in her hands. She positioned the horse behind a boulder, giving herself cover. The riders emerged from the rocks, spreading out. 3 men and 1 woman, all armed, all watching her with the wariness of people used to trouble. The woman raised her hand, palm out. "Easy, we're not looking for a fight." "Then why are you following me?" "Because a woman riding alone through this territory at speed catches attention, especially when word's out that Blackwell's looking for someone." The woman was maybe 50, weathered and hard, with gray hair pulled back severe. "You're Hale's wife." It wasn't a question, but Mara answered anyway. "Maybe. No maybe about it. You match the description. Young, dark hair, riding a bay gelding, heading east in a hurry. The woman's eyes were sharp. Question is, why? That's my business. It becomes mine when Blackwell's men are asking questions about you in every town between here and the capital. The woman nudged her horse forward slowly. I'm Rose Carter. These are my sons, Jacob, Thomas, and Michael. We run cattle north of here, or we did, before Blackwell decided he wanted our grazing rights. Mara lowered the rifle slightly. He burned you out? Not yet, but he's working on it. We heard about what happened to the Carmichaels, the Ramirez family. Kate Farrell's barn. Rose's expression hardened. We heard there's people finally organizing, standing up to him. That true? Yes. And you're riding to the capital to get help. Mara hesitated. Trusting strangers was dangerous. But Rose Carter's face held the same exhausted determination Mara had seen in Kate, in Maria, in all of them. I'm carrying documentation, Mara said carefully. Evidence of what Blackwell's done. I'm taking it to the territorial governor. You'll never make it alone. I don't have a choice. Yeah, you do. You ride with us. Rose gestured to her sons. We're heading to the capital too. Been planning it for weeks. Safety in numbers. Why should I trust you? Because if I wanted to stop you, I'd have shot you already instead of talking. Rose's smile was grim. And because, like it or not, we're on the same side. Blackwell's your enemy, same as he's mine. Mara studied them. The sons looked capable and rough, but not cruel. Rose had the bearing of someone who'd survived too much to bother with lies. All right, Mara said finally, but we ride fast and we don't stop except for water and rest. Agreed. We've got supplies enough for all of us, and Michael here used to scout for the army. He knows how to spot trouble before it spots us. Michael, the youngest son, nodded. I'll ride point. Thomas takes rear. Ma and Jacob stay with you in the middle. They moved out in formation, Mara tucked between Rose and Jacob like something precious that needed protecting. It rankled a bit. She'd gotten used to standing on her own, but she also recognized the practicality of it. Your husband let you ride out alone? Rose asked after they'd been traveling for an hour. He didn't let me do anything. I chose it. He argued, though. Of course he argued. He's terrified I won't come back. Will you? Mara looked at Rose. What kind of question is that? The kind you ask when you've seen enough people leave and not return. This territory eats people, girl. Strong ones, weak ones, doesn't matter. You sure you know what you're doing? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Rose laughed, short and sharp. I can see why Ronan married you. You're just stubborn enough to survive him. They rode until dark, making camp in a protected canyon with good sight lines. Michael posted watch while the rest of them ate cold rations. No fire, nothing to draw attention. Blackwell's got patrols everywhere, Rose explained, tearing into jerky with strong teeth. He knows someone's going to try to reach the governor eventually. He's watching the roads. How do you know? Because I've been planning this run for 2 months. I've watched his patterns. He's got men stationed at every major crossing, every town, every place someone might stop for supplies. Rose pulled out a worn map, spreading it on the ground. Regular route would take you through here, here, and here. All watched. But there's another way. She traced an alternative path, longer, rougher, through terrain that looked barely passable. This adds a day, maybe 2, but it keeps us clear of Blackwell's eyes until we're close to the capital. By then, we'll be in range of federal territory. He can't touch us there without bringing the government down on his head. Will it work? It better, because if we get caught in the open, we're dead. Simple as that. Mara studied the map, committing the route to memory. My husband's waiting for me to come back in 3 days. Then he's going to be disappointed. This will take 5, maybe 6, depending on conditions. He'll think I'm dead. Better than actually being dead. Rose rolled up the map. You can send word once we reach the capital. Until then, he'll have to wait. Mara thought about Ronan standing in the yard, watching her ride away. The look on his face, the fear he'd tried so hard to hide. 5 or 6 days might as well be forever in his mind. But Rose was right. Getting there alive mattered more than getting there fast. They slept in shifts, 2 people awake at all times. Mara took the midnight watch with Jacob, who turned out to be surprisingly talkative. Ma doesn't trust Easy, he said, keeping his voice low. If she's riding with you, she's decided you're worth the risk. Why take the risk at all? Because Blackwell killed our father 2 years back. Made it look like an accident. Horse threw him, broke his neck. But Pa was the best rider in the territory. He didn't get thrown by accident. Jacob's jaw was tight. Ma's been waiting for the right moment to move against him. When she heard about what you folks were doing, organizing, she knew it was time. I'm sorry about your father. Don't be sorry. Help us make it count. They rode out at first light, following Rose's alternative route through increasingly rough country. The land rose into foothills, the desert giving way to something greener and more forested. It was beautiful but treacherous. Narrow passes where a single rock slide could trap them, river crossings swollen from the recent storm, terrain that tested even experienced riders. On the third day, they saw smoke. Michael spotted it first, signaling for them to halt. In the distance, maybe 5 miles south, a column of black smoke rose against the sky. That's the main road, Rose said grimly. Whatever's burning, it's meant to be seen. A signal? Mara asked. Or a warning. Either way, we made the right choice avoiding it. They pushed on, but the smoke followed them like a shadow, a reminder of what waited if they made a wrong move. That night, camped in a grove of cottonwoods near a stream, Rose sat down next to Mara. Tell me about your people, the ones you left behind. Mara described the ranch, the families, the way they'd come together after the storm. She talked about Kate's fierce determination, Maria's quiet strength, Carlos's resilience even with a dislocated shoulder. And she talked about Ronan, how he'd been broken and silent when she arrived, how he'd slowly started coming back to life. You love him, Rose said. Not a question. I think so. It's too new to be sure. But yes, probably. That makes this harder. What do you mean? Rose looked at her levelly. If you didn't care, failing wouldn't hurt. But you do care, which means if we don't make it, if we can't get the governor to act, you have to go back and tell them it was all for nothing. That's a heavy weight. So I better not fail. That's one way to look at it. On the fourth day, they finally saw the capital in the distance. It wasn't much by Eastern standards, a collection of territorial government buildings, a few decent hotels, stores, and businesses serving the surrounding ranches. But after days in the wilderness, it looked like civilization itself. We go in quiet, Rose instructed. Find the governor's office. Deliver the evidence. Don't draw attention. They entered town separately, filtering in from different directions to avoid looking like a group. Mara rode straight to the governor's office, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The building was modest, 2 stories, territorial flag hanging limp in the still air. Mara tied Flint to the hitching post and climbed the steps, the saddlebag with all their documentation heavy on her shoulder. Inside, a clerk looked up from his desk. He was young, bored, already dismissive before Mara even opened her mouth. Help you? I need to see the governor. It's urgent. Governor's busy. You can leave a message. This can't wait. I have evidence of land fraud, arson, murder. Everyone's got complaints, miss. Leave your name and someone will get back to you. Mara slammed the saddlebag on his desk hard enough to make him jump. People are dying. Properties are being burned. A land baron named Cord Blackwell is terrorizing the entire Dust Creek territory, and your office is doing nothing about it. That's a serious accusation. It's a documented fact. I have testimony from dozens of families. I have property assessments. I have names of his men, dates of attacks, a pattern of violence that's been going on for years. Mara leaned forward. Now you can either let me speak to the governor, or I'm going to stand on the street outside and tell everyone who'll listen that the territorial government doesn't care when citizens are being murdered for their land. The clerk's face flushed. You can't threaten. I'm not threatening. I'm promising. Your choice. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then the clerk stood abruptly. Wait here. He disappeared through a door. Mara waited, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. This had to work. It had to. The clerk returned 5 minutes later. The governor will see you. 10 minutes. Don't waste his time. Mara was led into an office that was larger but not much more impressive than the outer room. The governor sat behind his desk, a man in his 60s with the look of someone who'd seen too many petitions and not enough results. Miss? Coulter. Mara Coulter. I'm told you have accusations against Cord Blackwell. The governor's tone was skeptical. Mr. Blackwell is a respected businessman in this territory. He's contributed significantly to development and infrastructure. You understand I can't simply accept accusations without proof. I have proof. Mara opened the saddlebag, spreading documents across his desk. Testimony from 8 families who've been burned out or threatened. Property damage assessments witnessed and signed. A pattern of violence and intimidation spanning 3 years. The governor picked up one document, then another, his expression shifting from skepticism to attention. This is extensive. This is a fraction of what he's done. There are families too scared to come forward, witnesses who've been threatened, people who've disappeared. Mara's voice was steady now, certain. Blackwell's building a monopoly through terror. He's trying to control all the water rights in Dust Creek territory, so when the railroad comes through, he owns access. Everyone else pays his price or loses everything. The railroad project is still years away, which is why he's moving now, getting control before federal oversight arrives. Once the railroad's here, his position becomes unassailable. But right now you can stop him. You have the authority. The governor was quiet, reading through the documents with increasing attention. Finally, he looked up. If even half of this is true, it's conspiracy, arson, and possibly murder. But prosecution requires investigation. Federal marshals, that takes time. How much time? Months. Maybe longer. Mara's heart sank. The people in Dust Creek don't have months. Blackwell's escalating. He burned 4 properties in one night just last week. We're organizing resistance, but without federal protection, he'll kill us all before any investigation concludes. I can't send marshals based solely on testimony. I need evidence that will stand up in court. Physical evidence. Financial records proving fraud. Witnesses willing to testify under oath. These people are willing to testify. They signed statements. Statements can be coerced or fabricated. I need someone credible. Someone Blackwell can't easily discredit. The governor looked at her. You said Ronan Hale is leading this resistance? Yes. The governor's expression changed. Ronan Hale. The same man accused of killing his wife? Mara felt cold settle in her stomach. He was cleared. The inquest found it was an accident. The inquest found insufficient evidence to prosecute. That's not the same as innocent. The governor pushed the documents back toward her. I'm sorry, Miss Coulter, but if Hale is your primary witness, Blackwell's lawyers will destroy his credibility in minutes. No jury will believe a man with that history.
That's not fair, Sep. Fair doesn't matter. What matters is what I can prove in court. And right now, I can't prove anything beyond reasonable doubt. Mara stared at him, feeling everything collapse. So you'll do nothing. I'll open an investigation, quietly. Send someone to observe. But I can't move against Blackwell directly without risking the case falling apart. He softened slightly. I know that's not what you want to hear, but it's the reality of how law works. Law. Mara laughed bitterly. Law is why Blackwell gets away with this, because he's rich enough to buy lawyers and sheriffs and make evidence disappear, while the rest of us just have to survive and hope someone with power eventually gives a damn. Miss Coulter. Thank you for your time, Governor. Mara gathered the documents, shoving them back into the saddlebag. I'll tell the families you're investigating quietly while they're burned out loudly. I'm sure that'll comfort them. She left before he could respond, her vision blurry with rage and tears she refused to shed. Outside, Rose was waiting with her sons. Well? Rose asked. He won't help, not directly. Said he needs more evidence, more credibility, more time we don't have. Mara wanted to scream, wanted to break something. We came all this way for nothing. Not nothing, Rose said firmly. He knows now. It's on record. That matters. It doesn't matter if we're all dead before he decides to act. Thomas, one of Rose's sons, spoke up. There might be another way. Everyone turned to look at him. What way? Rose asked. Federal Land Office. They've got jurisdiction over homestead claims. If we can prove Blackwell's interfering with legitimate claims, sabotaging improvements, that's federal crime. Different authority than the territorial governor. Mara felt a flicker of hope. Would they act faster? Maybe, especially if we've got documentation showing he's deliberately destroying proof of improvement to invalidate claims.
That hits them where they care. Property rights. The federal government takes that seriously. Where's the land office? 2 streets over, but we should be smart about this. Go in with a specific strategy. Don't just dump evidence and hope. They found a small boarding house where Rose rented a room, and they spread out all the documentation on the bed, organizing it properly. Not just testimony about violence, but specific instances of Blackwell's men destroying improvements. The barn Kate had built, part of her homestead requirement. The fences Ronan had repaired, the garden Mara had planted. Each destruction was an attempt to invalidate legitimate land claims. "This is it," Rose said, reading through the reorganized documents. "This is the angle. Blackwell's not just terrorizing people. He's committing systematic fraud against the federal homestead program." They walked to the federal land office as a group this time, not bothering with subtlety. The clerk there was older, more professional, and actually listened when Mara started talking. "You're alleging deliberate sabotage of homestead improvements?" "I'm documenting it. Multiple properties. Pattern of destruction specifically targeting proof of claim." Mara handed over the reorganized evidence. "And I can provide sworn testimony from every family affected." The clerk read carefully, his expression growing increasingly serious. Finally, he stood. "Wait here. I need to speak with the director." 20 minutes passed, then 40. Mara paced the small office while Rose sat calmly, and her sons kept watch at the windows. When the clerk returned, he wasn't alone. An older man in a suit, the director presumably, studied them with sharp eyes. "I've reviewed your documentation," he said without preamble. "If accurate, this represents serious federal crimes, but I need verification. I need to see the damaged properties myself. Assess whether the destruction pattern supports your claims." "Then come to Dust Creek," Mara said. "Come see what he's done." "That would require travel authorization, security. We'll provide security. We'll guide you to every damaged property. You can interview families, examine the ruins, document everything yourself." Mara stepped forward. "But you have to come now, not in weeks or months, now. Because Blackwell's still destroying property and terrorizing people, and every day you delay gives him another chance to cover his tracks." The director and clerk exchanged glances. "I can authorize an emergency inspection," the director said slowly. 2 federal agents, myself included. We leave tomorrow." "Why not today?" "Because I need to gather proper documentation tools, arrange travel, brief the agents. Tomorrow is the fastest I can move." He looked at her steadily. "But I give you my word. Tomorrow at dawn, we ride for Dust Creek. And if your evidence holds up, Cord Blackwell will face federal prosecution." It wasn't perfect. It wasn't immediate. But it was real action from someone with actual authority. "Tomorrow," Mara agreed. "We'll meet you here. And thank you." They left the office and stood in the street, the late afternoon sun slanting between buildings. "You did it," Rose said quietly. "You actually did it." "Not yet. Not until they see the damage. Not until Blackwell's actually stopped." "But you got them moving. That's more than anyone else has managed." Rose gripped her shoulder. "Your husband's going to be proud." Mara thought about Ronan, 5 or 6 days thinking she might be dead. "He's going to be furious I took so long. He'll get over it when he sees what you accomplished." They spent that night at the boarding house, Mara barely sleeping despite her exhaustion. At dawn, they met the federal director and his 2 agents, both former Army, both armed and serious. The ride back was faster with the promise of federal action pushing them forward. They took the main road this time, not bothering with caution. Let Blackwell's men see them coming. Let them report back that federal agents were en route. 3 days of hard riding brought them within sight of Dust Creek territory. As they crested the final ridge before the valley opened up, Mara saw smoke again. Not one fire. Multiple fires. The whole valley seemed to be burning. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." They rode hard, descending into chaos. As they got closer, Mara could make out individual fires, properties burning, the smoke from different ranches creating a pall across the entire landscape. And in the middle of it all, riders, dozens of them. Blackwell's men, riding in organized lines, torches in hand. It wasn't harassment anymore. It was war. The federal agents pulled up their horses, staring at the devastation. "Is this what you meant?" the director asked, his voice tight. "This is worse than it's ever been," Mara said. "He's escalating because he knows we went for help." Then we stop him now. Federal authority supersedes any territorial jurisdiction. Those men are committing crimes on federal land. We have authority to intervene. There's dozens of them. And I'm a federal officer. They assault me. They're facing federal charges and federal prison. He turned to his agents. We're riding in. We're stopping this. Document everything you see. They rode toward the nearest fire, the Johnson place. Bill Johnson stood in his yard with a rifle, his wife and children behind him, facing down 3 of Blackwell's men on horseback. This is your last warning, one of Blackwell's men was saying. Sell or burn, your choice. Federal agents, the director's voice rang out. Stand down immediately. The riders turned, saw the agents, and hesitated. The lead man's hand drifted toward his gun. I wouldn't, one of the federal agents said calmly, his own pistol already drawn. Assaulting a federal officer carries a mandatory sentence. You really want to spend the next 20 years in prison? This is private business. This is federal land under federal homestead law, which makes it federal business. Now drop your weapons and dismount. All of you. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, Blackwell's men complied, dropping their guns and climbing down from their horses. The director looked at Bill Johnson. You're the property owner? Yes, sir. These men threatened you? Threatened to burn me out if I didn't sell, same as they've done to half the valley. I'll need a statement, written and signed. The director turned to his agents. Secure these men. We're taking them into federal custody. More riders appeared, Rose's sons coming from different directions with news of other fires, other confrontations. And behind them, moving slower, Ronan on Cinder. He saw Mara and his face transformed. Fear to relief, to fury, to something that might have been love, all in the space of a heartbeat. Mara slid from Flint's back and ran to him. Ronan dismounted and caught her, holding so tight she could barely breathe. 6 days, he said roughly against her hair. 6 days I thought you were dead. I'm sorry. It took longer than expected. But I brought help, real help. He pulled back enough to look at her face, then at the federal agents arresting Blackwell's men. What did you do? What we needed. I got federal agents. They're here to investigate, document, arrest. It's over, Ronan. We can actually stop him now. But even as she said it, more riders appeared on the ridge. Not Blackwell's random crew. This was organized, deliberate. And at the front, on a big black horse, sat a man Mara had never seen but recognized instantly from descriptions. Cord Blackwell himself. He was smaller than she'd imagined, almost unassuming in his expensive clothes and groomed appearance. But there was something cold in how he sat that horse, how he surveyed the scene like he owned not just the land, but everyone on it. Well, Blackwell's voice carried across the distance, seems we have visitors, federal agents, I'm told, investigating wild accusations from disgruntled settlers. He smiled and it didn't touch his eyes. I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. These people have been under terrible stress. Fires, storms, failed crops. It's tragic. Sometimes grief makes people see conspiracies where there are only unfortunate accidents. There's nothing accidental about systematic arson, the director said coldly. We have documentation, testimony, and now we have your men caught in the act of threatening a homesteader. My men? I'm afraid you're mistaken. These men work independently. I have no control over their actions. You pay them. I employ ranch hands. What they do on their own time is their concern, not mine. Convenient. It's the truth. Blackwell's smile widened. But I understand you have a job to do. Investigate all you like. You'll find I'm a legitimate businessman operating within the law. These people, however, he gestured at Ronan, at Mara, at all of them. These people are squatters on disputed land making false accusations to cover their own failures. Their land claims are registered with the federal office, the director said. They're legitimate homesteaders. Are they? Because I have documentation suggesting otherwise. Purchased rights, prior claims, legal complexities that I'm sure will all be sorted out in court. Blackwell's eyes found Mara. In the meantime, I do hope everyone stays safe. These are dangerous lands. Accidents happen. Wouldn't want anyone to get hurt. It was a threat, blatant and barely veiled. Before anyone could respond, another voice cut through the tension. You killed my wife. Everyone turned. Ronan had stepped forward, his whole body rigid with barely controlled rage. You killed Emma. You set that fire. You took my daughter. And you've spent 2 years making me think I was crazy for believing it." Blackwell's expression didn't change. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Hale, but grief has clearly affected your judgment. I had nothing to do with that tragedy." "Liar." Ronan's hand moved toward his gun. "Ronan, don't." Mara grabbed his arm. "Don't give him an excuse. He killed her. He took Sarah, and he's standing there smiling about it." "I know. But if you shoot him now, you go to prison and he still wins. Let the law handle it." "The law hasn't done anything for 2 years." "The law is here now," the director interjected. "Mr. Hale, I understand your anger, but my colleague is right. Violence now undermines everything we're trying to accomplish." Ronan was shaking, his jaw so tight Mara worried he'd crack teeth. But slowly, agonizingly, he stepped back. Blackwell laughed softly. "Smart man. You should listen to your wife more often, Hale. She seems to have sense you lack." "That's enough," the director said sharply. "Mr. Blackwell, you and your men need to vacate this property. These homesteaders have federal protection now. Any further interference will result in immediate arrest." "Of course, I'm a law-abiding citizen." Blackwell tipped his hat mockingly. "We'll see each other in court, I'm sure. I look forward to it." He turned his horse and rode away, his men following. But as he passed, he looked at Mara one more time, and the malice in that look was unmistakable. They all stood in silence until Blackwell was out of sight. "He's not going to stop," Kate said quietly. "Federal agents or not. He's too invested, too arrogant." "Then we document everything," the director said. "Every threat, every action. We build a case so airtight he can't slip through." He looked around at the assembled families. "I'll need statements from all of you, everything you can remember. Dates, times, witnesses. We're going to dismantle his operation piece by piece." The next 3 days were a blur of activity. The federal agents moved from property to property, photographing damage, interviewing families, documenting the pattern of destruction. They found evidence even Mara hadn't known about, financial records showing Blackwell had been bribing the local land office to delay claim certifications, correspondence between him and the sheriff arranging for investigations to be dropped. And then, on the 4th day, they found something else. Michael, Rose's son, was scouting the old Carmichael property when he saw fresh digging behind the burned-out barn. He investigated and found a shallow grave. Inside was a body, a man, dead maybe a month, with a bullet hole in the back of his skull. The federal agents identified him as James Morrison, a homesteader who'd disappeared weeks ago. In his pocket was a letter refusing Blackwell's latest offer to purchase his land. It was murder, documented, provable murder. The director sent riders to the territorial capital immediately, requesting federal marshals and arrest warrants. Blackwell was brought in for questioning, his calm facade finally cracking when confronted with the body. "I had nothing to do with that," he insisted. "Morrison and I had disagreements, but I would never—" "We have your men in custody," the director said coldly. 3 of them have already agreed to testify in exchange for reduced sentences. They're saying you ordered the killing, that you've ordered multiple killings. Blackwell's lawyer immediately demanded his client stop talking, but the damage was done. The facade of legitimacy had shattered, revealing the rot beneath. Federal marshals arrived 6 days later and arrested Cord Blackwell on charges of murder, conspiracy, arson, and fraud. His entire operation was frozen pending investigation. The sheriff who'd been on his payroll was arrested too. So was the land office clerk who'd been taking bribes. The whole corrupt system Blackwell had built collapsed in less than 2 weeks. Standing in the yard of the ranch, watching the marshals ride away with Blackwell in chains, Mara felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Real, solid hope. "It's over," Kate said beside her. "He's actually going to prison." "It's not completely over," the director cautioned. "There's still a trial, still legal proceedings. But with the evidence we have, conviction is almost certain. He'll spend the rest of his life in federal prison." Ronan stood apart from the group, staring at the horizon. Mara walked over to him. "You okay?" "I don't know what I am." His voice was rough. "For 2 years I've been fighting him, hating him, and now he's just gone. Arrested. Done. It doesn't feel real." "It is real. You survived him. We all did." He looked at her. "You did this. You rode to the Capitol. You convinced them to act.
We did this. All of us together. Mara took his hand. That's what you need to understand. You weren't alone in this fight. Not anymore. Mara, I need to tell you something. Ronan's hand was shaking slightly. While you were gone, I had time to think about Emma, about what actually happened that night. You don't have to. I do, because I've been lying to myself. The fire wasn't an accident. It was arson. I knew that, but I couldn't prove it, couldn't face it, so I just stopped. Stopped looking for Sarah. Stopped fighting. Stopped living. He met her eyes. You made me remember how to live again, how to fight for something instead of just against it. What are you saying? I'm saying we need to find her, Sarah. If she's alive, we need to bring her home.
Before Mara could respond, one of the federal agents approached. Mr. Hale, we found something while searching Blackwell's property. Correspondence. Letters. He handed over a bundle. They reference a child, a girl matching your daughter's description, being held at a ranch in Colorado. Ronan's hands shook as he took the letters. Mara read over his shoulder, her heart pounding. The letters were careful, coded, but clear enough. Blackwell had been paying someone to keep Sarah hidden, to raise her somewhere remote where Ronan would never find her. Insurance, the letters called it. Leverage if Ronan ever became too much of a problem. She's alive, Ronan's voice cracked. All this time, she's been alive. The marshals are already riding to Colorado, the agent said. They'll retrieve her and bring her back. Should be here in 2 weeks, maybe 3. Ronan sank down on the porch steps, his head in his hands. Mara sat beside him, her arm around his shoulders. She's coming home, Mara said softly. After everything, she's coming home. Will she even remember me? She was barely 4 when it happened. She's 7 now. I've missed 3 years. Then you have the rest of her life to make up for it. And she'll have a home to come back to. A real home. With people who care about her. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Ronan straightened, wiping his eyes roughly. We have a lot of work to do before she gets here. The house needs proper repairs. The barn needs a real roof. We need to make this place into something that looks like a home, not a battleground. Then we better get started. The next 2 weeks were a frenzy of activity. Everyone who'd been fighting Blackwell came together to rebuild, not just Ronan's ranch, but all the damaged properties. They worked as the cooperative they'd promised to become, sharing labor and resources, building something stronger than any of them could have managed alone. The house foundation was properly repaired and reinforced. The barn got a new roof, solid and tight. The garden was replanted, and this time it thrived. Fences were rebuilt, outbuildings were restored. The ranch transformed from a place of barely survival into something that looked like it had a future. On the 14th day, riders appeared on the horizon. Federal marshals. And with them, a small figure on a horse that looked too big for her. Ronan stood frozen, watching them approach. Mara squeezed his hand. Go. Go meet your daughter. He walked forward on legs that seemed barely able to hold him. The marshals dismounted, helping the little girl down. She was small for 7, thin, with dark hair and eyes that held too much caution for someone so young. Sarah? Ronan's voice was barely a whisper. The girl looked at him, uncertainty and fear and something else warring in her expression. Papa? That one word broke him. Ronan dropped to his knees, his arms opening, and Sarah ran to him. They held each other, both crying, both shaking, 3 years of separation collapsing in a single moment. Mara turned away, giving them privacy, her own eyes burning. Kate stood beside her, watching with a bittersweet expression. Never thought I'd see that, Kate said quietly. Ronan Hale with hope on his face. He earned it. So did you. Eventually, Ronan stood, lifting Sarah easily despite her weight. He carried her toward the house, toward Mara, toward the home they'd built together. Sarah, this is Mara, Ronan said, his voice still rough. She's my wife. I guess your stepmother, if that's okay. Sarah looked at Mara with those 2 wise eyes. Did you help Papa find me? I helped your papa remember he was worth saving. He did the rest. Will you send me away again? The question was knife sharp. Mara knelt down, meeting Sarah at eye level. Never. This is your home. For always. No matter what happens, you belong here. You understand? Sarah studied her for a long moment. Then slowly, she nodded. The weeks turned into months. The federal trial proceeded, and Cord Blackwell was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to life in prison. His assets were seized and distributed as restitution to the families he'd harmed. The sheriff was convicted too, along with the corrupt land office clerk and several of Blackwell's men. The territory began to heal. The cooperative ranch thrived under shared management. They rotated responsibilities, shared profits, supported each other through bad seasons, and celebrated together during good ones. It wasn't perfect. There were arguments, disagreements, moments of frustration, but it worked because they made it work. Sarah slowly came out of her shell, the caution fading as she realized this was real, this was safe, this was home. She followed Ronan everywhere, relearning her father, building new memories to replace the traumatic ones. And she bonded with Mara in unexpected ways. Mara taught her to garden, to cook, to shoot. Sarah taught Mara what it meant to be patient, to be gentle, to be the kind of person a child could trust. One evening, 6 months after Sarah's return, Mara stood in the garden watching the sunset. The plants were thriving, tomatoes, beans, squash, all growing strong. It looked nothing like that first devastated plot she'd tried to build in hostile soil. Ronan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different everything is from when I arrived. This place, these people, you, me. Good, different, or bad different?" "Just different." "But yeah, good." She leaned back against him. "I keep thinking about that first night. When you said you needed a wife who could work and wouldn't expect conversation or affection, how wrong we both were about what we actually needed. What did we need? Partnership, real partnership. Someone to fight beside, not just work beside. Someone to build with." She turned in his arms. "Someone to love." "I do love you," Ronan said. "In case that wasn't clear. I love you in a way I didn't think I was capable of anymore. You saved me, Mara." "We saved each other." He kissed her, and it was different from that first desperate kiss before she'd left for the capital. This was certain, grounded, the kiss of two people who'd been through hell together and come out the other side. When they broke apart, Sarah was standing on the porch watching them with an expression that was somewhere between amused and disgusted. "Are you two always like this?" she called. "Yes," Mara called back. "Get used to it." Sarah made a face, but she was smiling. She'd been smiling more lately, real smiles that reached her eyes. That night, after Sarah was asleep and the ranch was quiet, Mara and Ronan sat on the porch like they had so many times before. But everything was different now. The air was easier. The silence was comfortable instead of heavy. "I've been thinking," Ronan said, "about the future, about what we're building here. And I want to make it official, the cooperative, not just a verbal agreement, actual legal partnership, equal shares for everyone, binding contracts that protect us all." That's a big step. It's the right step. These people stood with us when it would have been easier to run. They deserve security, real security. He looked at her. "What do you think?" "I think you're finally understanding what strength actually looks like. I learned from the best." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the desert, an owl calling, wind through grass, the distant sound of cattle settling for the night. "You ever regret it?" Ronan asked quietly. "Answering my advertisement? Coming out here?" Mara thought about the girl she'd been, invisible, beaten down, convinced she'd never matter to anyone. And she thought about who she was now, scarred, strong, standing at the center of something that mattered. "Not even once," she said. "Good, because I'm not letting you go." Wasn't planning on leaving. She leaned against him, and they watched the stars come out one by one until the sky was full of them, bright and endless and possible. The ranch stretched out around them in the darkness. This place they'd fought for, bled for, almost died for. It wasn't perfect. The work was hard. The land was unforgiving. There would be more storms, more struggles, more days when giving up seemed easier than continuing. But they'd face it together, all of them. The families who'd chosen partnership over isolation. The cooperative they'd built from desperation and determination. The home they'd made in a place that had tried so hard to break them. And Mara Coulter, once invisible, once erased, stood at the center of it all. Not because she was perfect or fearless or special, but because she'd refused to disappear, because she'd chosen to stand up, to speak up, to fight back. Because she'd learned that strength wasn't about being unbreakable. It was about getting broken and choosing to heal, choosing to keep going, choosing to build instead of surrender. The desert wind picked up, warm and familiar, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. Somewhere in the darkness, Sarah called out in her sleep. Ronan stood immediately, heading inside to check on his daughter. Mara stayed on the porch a moment longer, looking out at the land that had tried to kill her and had instead taught her how to live. Then she followed Ronan inside, closing the door on the night, on the past, on everything they'd survived. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, new struggles. But tonight, they were home. And home was enough.